College football is such a unique experience that it causes us to laugh and shout and pump our fists and celebrate and jump for joy and fall to our knees in excruciating, exasperating pain and disappointment. But most of all, it's about positive energy, positive vibes and attitude and community and togetherness. And what we do right here at the Voice of College Football in our community is obviously come together and talk college football. And many friendships have been built through our connections. And one of the more rewarding parts of what I do is probably every few days, somebody will mention to me that they have made connections with somebody else because they made the connection here. And whether that's just an online connection of communicating back and forth and talking, or actually meeting in person or collaborating. A lot of you have built collaborations and let me know, hey, I now do a podcast with somebody else, or I now do a YouTube channel with somebody else and I met them here, or I started my own brand. I started my own platform because of what we do here at the Voice of College Football. So before we get started on the action from today and tonight that was so exhilarating and so meaningful and so impactful, we want to honor, I will say, one of our own here at the Voice of College Football. And I know that Jeff was on a number of other platforms from what I understand in regards to just loving college football. So wanting to get out there as much as possible and talk about the game he loves with all of you. But Jeff Webster, who was a frequent caller to the show and oh so supportive. I'll remember so many things about Jeff. Jeff has passed away just here in the last day, I believe. I just found out this afternoon. So I thank you to the number of you who let me know, who reached out to me personally and let me know that J-Dub was no longer with us. J-Dub from Des Moines, that might spark some of your memories, or the Alabama fan, Jeff Webster, who would call in, always would bring up all sorts of great scenarios and stories and game performances from the past and things that he had remembered, or issues that he had with the other callers that he wanted to correct. It was always an intriguing and interesting. You always had to say, I know he exasperated a lot of you, but in a good way, because he caused all of us to think and to respond. And when I say a loyal supporter here, always would let everyone know, hey, look at what Mark's doing. We need to support him. He's taking this on. We need to support him. Use the Amazon link. He would always come up with a creative way to describe how he used the Amazon link, and would come up with a different angle to it each and every time, and just encourage everyone to hit the like button and to support what we do here at the Voice of College Football. So again, just found out a few hours ago that Jeff Webster, J-Dub, has passed on, and I don't know the circumstances involving. It really doesn't matter because he's no longer with us. So depending on your beliefs, for me, it's my prayers go out to not Jeff. He is passed. My prayers go on to his family and his friends, those that are most deeply touched and hurt by his passing. My prayers go out to them. Let's honor and dedicate and recognize Jeff tonight and dedicate this show to him. What a day of college football, folks. What a day of college football. We will take your call, starting with the real MVP. I'm sure he has an interesting take on the day in college football, considering his favorite team and what happened to them today. We posted a video a few hours ago because I just flat out, you know what? I should be a better businessman. I should be a better businessman because I know what videos, most of the time, I know what videos will rate on this main channel. I know. However, Vanderbilt is not one of them. But I went to the well and I celebrated Vandy's win over Kentucky. And we will go through that. More meaningful, more impactful games for the college football playoff race went on tonight, of course. And we will talk up the Oregon-Washington game. The Huskies pull off the upset at Autzen Stadium. We witnessed tonight Georgia continuing to roll through the SEC, and they roll through the Bulldogs, the other Bulldogs in the SEC at Mississippi State, putting up 45 points. And then we also saw tonight a Texas offense littered with blue chippers, 5 stars, All-Americans, and maybe the best running back in college football, not be able to get it done against a TCU team that continues to defy the odds. I think everybody counted them out in this game. I did not count them out. I did predict that they would lose the game. Not surprising to me that they won the game. They went to Austin and they defeated a Texas team that we've seen play very strong football at times. And we will take you through the rest of the country, of course, what happened in the Big Ten, the ACC, with North Carolina coming up with an enormous win. Many of you will discount it because, of course, you're focused just solely on the college football playoff. But we honor the conference championships. And I obviously, if you listen to me on a regular basis, I actually put more into the conference championship races than the playoff chase itself. So North Carolina has clinched a spot in the ACC championship game with a win over Wake Forest. Exciting football game as well. As usual, my only frustration on this day, let's make it 2, in addition to the personal situation there, my 2 football frustrations of the day, and these are always the case, when I get beat on a bad beat on one of my predictions, and that happened several times today, when it just didn't need to happen, when you've got a line on a game and you know exactly what's going to happen, and actually the game plays out exactly the way you believe, and you get nailed with a bad beat at the end. That hurts. And then also just the sheer annoyance that I can't watch all the games at the same time. So I try to keep track of as many as possible, and now I better keep track of your calls because they're piling up. So let's get to it with the real MVP, and let's kick this thing off. And before we get started, everyone, please like the video. Please consider the Amazon link when you do your shopping there. And also keep in mind that there's all sorts of people that you know that love college football, or at least like it this time of year, that would have fun joining us here, and they have no idea. Can you believe they have no idea that we are here at the Voice of College Football? There are actually folks out there that don't know of the Voice of College Football. I know many of you assume that everyone knows that we're here, the Voice of College Football. Everybody knows the Voice of College Football, of course. Actually, no. So enlighten those people, bring them on in. You can even do that tonight here at the Voice of College Football. All right, without further ado, to Real MVP.
Well, Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine. I enjoyed the college football tonight and throughout the day.
I did too, except for one game. Didn't go the way I wanted to, but Mark, this is why you got to play the games. Games aren't won on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter how many 4, 5, 3 stars you have compared to another team. What I saw with my Kentucky Wildcats was they got outplayed by Vanderbilt. It's that simple. Vanderbilt had the best player on the field, in my opinion, with their quarterback, was able to scramble around, convert some key third downs, and outside of the fourth quarter, Kentucky's offense really couldn't do a whole lot. This wasn't a fluke. There wasn't trick plays involved in this. At least from what I saw, it was Vanderbilt went into Lexington and came out with the W. And if they played tomorrow, guess what? I'm confident saying Vanderbilt would beat Kentucky. They're just improving. They're not a good football team. I don't think they're a good football team, but they are a more capable football team than they have shown in the last few years. And I think for now on, going into the future, they're probably going to get at least one opponent in the SEC East. Would you agree with that?
That Vandy's going to beat it. Run that by me again.
They're going to beat at least one opponent in the SEC East.
I'm doing too many things here. They have already done that.
Yeah, I know. Well, for going forward, like next year, instead of them going winless, we can project them to win at least one SEC game.
Well, I'm not projecting anything in November for the next November. Like if we rewound a year and we tried to predict what's going on in college football right now, no, I'm not doing that. The only thing I'm going to tell you is that Vandy won't win the SEC next year. That's the prediction I will make a year in advance. But yeah, it was impressive what they did. The one caveat that I will say, and I included this in my video, is I understand that Kentucky made an interception that would have iced the game. I hate to hear this. And even though this resulted in Vandy winning the game, and I think that's great for Vandy, and I like to see long losing streaks end, and I feel good for those players and coaches that suffered for that many weeks, that I hate when I hear that a personal foul really handed them the opportunity to win. They threw an interception that would have iced the game for Kentucky, but there was a personal foul. I at least hope that it was justified, because many personal fouls that I see a bit iffy, and I don't like when the refs dictate the game or determine the outcome.
I understand that, Mark, but when Kentucky's playing Vanderbilt, it shouldn't have to be that case.
True.
The first, Vanderbilt played well enough, or Kentucky played bad enough, depends on which side you want to look at it, where that call made a difference. And that should be unacceptable for Kentucky football. Kentucky should be at the place where they are clearly better than Vanderbilt. And the fact they are not is alarming. Maybe staff changes are needed at the offensive coordinator position or the offensive line. I've heard Kentucky's given up like 40 sacks this season. That's got to be near the top of the list in college football, Mark. I mean, how are you supposed? That's just drive killers. 40 sacks. That's bad. I don't care how you frame it or slice it. It's just unexplainable.
I know you've been on the Kentucky offensive line the entire season, and it's been awful. And I've seen you play a few times, and it is pretty bad. I was trying to go to the stats to see where that does rank. And I'm sure Will Levis threw a desperation ball to end the game. I looked at the play-by-play and saw that the final pass was an interception.
Yeah, that is correct. He threw for under 200 yards again. I think this is either since week 7 he hasn't thrown for over 200 yards, or for 7 straight games he hasn't thrown for over 200 yards. I'm not sure which one, but it's part of that's on him, part of that's on the receivers. But in my opinion, when the offensive line, you don't have enough time and you're taking so long for these concepts in place to develop, it's just not a good recipe. And also, Kentucky takes forever to hike the football. Kentucky at one point took like 35 seconds out of the 40-second play clock. That's probably changed a little bit now, but if you're going to shrink the game, you're going to allow these teams that are inferior to you to hang around, and it allows for these upsets to happen.
I cited a game from a few years ago, and this was one of Kentucky's better teams. This was one of those Terry Wilson teams. I don't know if it was the one that beat Penn State in the Citrus Bowl. It was one of those teams. I think it was that team that actually played a really bad Vandy team, and the game was 7-7 with like 10 seconds left, and then Kentucky finally scored to win the game. But they played that kind of game against everybody, but they kind of snuck through over and over and over and over. Here's your stat right here. You want to get this one? Sacks. Kentucky now Kentucky now is 128th in the country in sacks allowed, meaning they're third worst. Only Tulsa, Colorado State, and the mighty University of Akron Zips have given up more sacks than Kentucky.
That's bad, Mark. That's real bad.
It's unbelievably bad. Surprisingly, LSU's given up a lot of sacks. I was trying to go up the charts to see the next good team that has given up a ton of sacks. It was LSU.
I wonder how much of the LSU is because they got a mobile quarterback, though.
Yeah, he's running around extending plays. Yep.
Yeah, Kentucky's quarterback, he is a little bit mobile, but nowhere near Jaden Daniels' level of mobile. So I wonder how much that plays into it. But I was expecting the offensive line to take a step back, but this is alarmingly bad. Kentucky's probably got the worst offensive line in the Power 5. This is horrible. And Kentucky's probably going to go 6-6, maybe 7-5. The only realistic goals I have for this week or this season for Kentucky is to continue their non-conference record. So they have the most consecutive wins against non-conference opponents. The last time they lost was in like 2017 or something like that in the Music City Bowl. So I'd like to keep that going. All they got to do is beat Louisville and win their bowl game, which their bowl game's probably not going to be against somebody as good as before today. So it's still on the table. And, there is a silver lining, Mark. We always got to look at silver linings. And, one of the lower bowl games for the SEC is the Las Vegas Bowl. And how fun would it be if Kentucky, because of what I say about the Pac-12, Kentucky gets to beat a Pac-12 team? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that just be good content?
It would be great content for me because I can sit back and I've got nothing to lose. It's you against our Pac-12 contingent. Maybe we get like a Kentucky, Oregon State Pac-12, Las Vegas Bowl. That would be beautiful. I'll take it all day.
Yeah, that would be a good game. But, Mark, there was some other games where there were some other upsets. Kentucky may have not had the most embarrassing loss of the day because Boston College beat North Carolina State on the road. What happened in that game?
I saw one play in the game. That was the game-winning touchdown by Boston College. I don't know what happened in that game. I know that NC State, of course, has been playing pretty well without Devin Leary. They tried one quarterback, Jack Chambers. He's a runner. They decided he's not the answer, and then they brought in this MJ Morris, and he's been really good, close to Devin Leary play. But they didn't score many points today, so they obviously had offensive issues against BC. They only were leading the game, most of the game, like 20-14, and they get burned with a touchdown late. Can I say, these things happen in college football where, again, the very, very top of the sport, we know who those teams are, they almost never get upset. They only win games against each other, then the very worst are the very worst. But in between, you're going to get these games. Yeah, Boston College is not as good as North Carolina State, and I would tend to disagree with, and I understand your point. Today Vandy was better than Kentucky, but Vandy is not better than Kentucky. Kentucky is still decidedly better than Vandy, but today Vandy won the game.
Yeah, well, my point of the matter was usually when there's that type of performance, people look at the box score and think, was there 5 turnovers? Was there a bunch of trick plays converted? Was the weather a factor like in the Ohio State Northwestern game? None of that was the case. It was just simply, in my opinion, Vandy wanted it more than Kentucky. That's what it came down to. They ran the ball better than Kentucky. They threw the ball better than Kentucky. Their quarterback played better, in my opinion, than Will Levis today. Kentucky, at no point in the game did Kentucky leave, I believe. And that kind of the way the game, well, no, except for the fourth quarter with Chris Rodriguez. They had the 75-yard run. But shout out to him, by the way, Chris Rodriguez, man. If Chris Rodriguez was not on the team, Kentucky might be a 4-8 team. Like, he is such a good running back. It's unbelievable. But, Mark, I've been reading your comments about when I mentioned the Pac-12. I understand Kentucky, as of today's performance, might only beat Stanford and Colorado. But, yeah, it was bad performance. There were some other games, though, Mark. Clemson clinched. North Carolina clinched. LSU clinched today. Georgia clinched. So we got to give props to those teams, Mark. What do you think those 2 championship games are going to look like?
Georgia, LSU. I think LSU is going to have to play the game of their lives. Their offense has been put together a few games, the Alabama game, the Florida game, but they don't bring it offensively every week, and they certainly didn't today against Arkansas. I watched the majority of that game. They were a train wreck. Harold Perkins might be my player of the day. He is a freak. He's amazing. He's a phenomenal talent. He won that game. You talk about a guy winning a game. Harold Perkins won LSU, the Western Division Championship today, and avoided that upset almost by himself. Phenomenal player.
Yeah.
But they're not going to beat Georgia unless Georgia has a really awful game, maybe the Missouri kind of effort at LSU, which I don't expect that in an SEC championship game, and LSU plays lights out. There's a decided difference between those two teams. Clemson, North Carolina is going to be extremely interesting because, of course, North Carolina is the firepower that Clemson does not. Clemson's better, much better defensive team, but Carolina is becoming competent defensively, better than they were.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of the Clemson-Louisville game you saw. I watched the first half of it. I didn't understand the call at the end of the first half. Louisville was down. They were in a Hail Mary opportunity, and they ran their quarterback, and he got injured on the play, and he was already hurt.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you would put him in that position in the first place. If you've got a guy who's clearly hurt, his hand, they were talking about his hand having an issue, and you decide to run it with him, the odds of converting that's got to be pretty low.
I've never understood teams that run the ball at the end of a half in their own end of the field when they can kneel down and end the half. That's never made any. Go for it. Are you trying to score points? Then score points. Or are you just ending the half? Then why risk fumbling the ball?
Right. They got, I think it was at Clemson's 40 where they were at. They got all the way down to like Clemson's 12, but once the quarterback, Malik Cunningham, got hurt on the play, I mean, Louisville's offense became pretty one-dimensional after that, in my opinion, and it was just a back-and-forth defensive struggle for the rest of the game. And, with that decision, that might not cost Louisville just this game, but the next game and the game after that. Because Louisville's got to go and play NC State and then Kentucky. Those are 2 winnable games, but I'm not sure how winnable they are for Louisville without Malik Cunningham.
Well, the backup quarterback that played today, Doman, he's had some good games. He's not Malik Cunningham, but he's had some nice games.
Yeah. the final thing I'll talk about, because I know I've probably been on here too long, Mark, is in the spirit of the underdog. We got to give UConn some credit. UConn, they're going bowling. Good for them, Mark.
And they beat the mighty Liberty team that a lot of people thought should be ranked. And this again shows why people that take the sport seriously and take rankings seriously, like myself, have to be convinced and are very reluctant to rank group of 5 teams because they don't play anywhere close to the same level of football. If Liberty is losing to UConn, they're not a top 25 team. I understand they beat Arkansas last week, but Arkansas is nowhere close to a top 25 team. So there it is. DeReal, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem. Congrats to Vanderbilt. Congrats to St. Peter's. And congrats to Sewanee.
All right. All right. We've got some Texas-TCU postgame coming up here at the Voice of College Football that you can catch either right here or over on the Texas channel. And we would ask that you would subscribe over at the Texas channel if you enjoy Texas football talk that we get on a regular basis we got Matthew and we got Brandon from D4 Sports that join us on a regular basis to talk up Texas. Matthew, how you doing tonight?
I am doing as good as I can, Mark, as good as I can.
Yeah. So from the outset of this game, the 2 defensive fronts were devastating. Both of them just running through the offensive lines like they did not exist. And so we'll take, obviously, the Texas side of this because it was impressive on their side that they just were throwing around Max Duggan and running through the TCU offensive line. But obviously, this made life difficult on Quinn Ewers. Even when he had time to throw, he didn't look impressive. Receivers dropping passes. It just seems inconceivable that a team that has improved the offensive line as much as Texas, with a talent like Quinn Ewers at quarterback, with arguably the best running back in the nation, and with an elite group of wide receivers, has 3 points with like 5 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, I can't really describe it. The play calling wasn't great, but it's more the execution and the intensity level. You saw the defensive intensity level. In my opinion, it was the best other than Alabama, and it may have been better. Whereas offense, there was no intensity whatsoever. It looked like they were going through the motions, and that's what I have the biggest issue with. And I have to blame Sark for that. Sark is that guy on the offensive side of the ball. I didn't mind the play calling. Like I said, play calling is fine, but you have to get your guys ready to play this game, and they should be. It's versus the number 4 team in the country, a team that I have a lot of respect for, a team that I think is better than basically every team other than probably 5 or 6 in the country. They may not be the 4th best team, but I think they're a top 7 team for sure. And you got to get up and play this game like the defense did. The defense was flying around. They were fast as hell. Barron Sorrell, as I pointed out in my preview on this channel and on the Texas channel, I thought he was our best pass rusher. His name was all over, or his name was called at multiple times during this game, especially in the first half. Bijan obviously struggled in this game. He didn't get many touches, though. We also didn't get him out of the backfield catching the ball. The one that we had him wide open for a touchdown, Quinn Ewers doesn't pull the trigger, and I think that goes to the confidence level of Quinn Ewers. I think after missing these deep balls to Xavier Worthy and other guys down the field, I think he got gun-shy, which is not good because if he's already getting gun-shy now, it's only going to get worse if he can't hit it at some point in the next couple games, and we only have 2 games left.
Yeah, so Texas loses 17-10. TCU continues to be undefeated. So, yeah, Bijan Robinson with 12 carries in a game that was scoreless forever, was 3-0 at the half, was even within reach at 10-0. Still, you got to give him the football. And I understand when you're going 3 and out, that a lot of time can elapse and you just don't run that many plays. They ran 61 plays. You usually want to run like 15 more than that. But Bijan Robinson only getting 12 carries.
Yeah, that's not enough. And again, if you can't run the ball, then you have to get creative in the passing game. And that's what I'm missing from the Sark offense, in my opinion, or what is missing from the Sark offense is getting the running backs involved in the passing game. We have 2 dynamic players out of the backfield, 2 NFL players out of the backfield, one that's going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. The other one's going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick. You have to get them involved in the passing game. Another guy that doesn't get involved enough, in my opinion, and us Texas fans have been begging for him to get involved, is Keelan Robinson. That guy is explosive, as you saw in that kick return. If he if he gets the ball in his hands, he can take it to the house. So I would like to see these guys more involved in the passing game. Another guy I talked about in the preview that I really think should get more involved and got more involved tonight, Jordan Whittington. You saw what he can do with the ball in his hands. He's an explosive playmaker. There's too many explosive playmakers all over this field for this Texas team to struggle like this on offense. The offensive line wasn't terrible for the most part. They did struggle early on, but there were passes there for Quinn Ewers to make. Xavier Worthy struggles finding the ball when it's in the air. Jatavian Sanders didn't look good early. He played great late down the stretch. Jordan Whittington obviously is another great wide receiving threat, and we used him, but just all around, just a very sloppy game on offense. And again, too much talent to only score 3 points on offense.
Yeah, Sanders dropped a pass, I think, in the first or second series and kept dropping a few, but he also made the one play that got the team down to the 1 yard line, or where he ran a post and blocked off the safety and bodied him up and made the catch to get Texas down to the goal line. So, all right, Matthew, anything else before we let you go start your post-game show?
No, the only thing I'll have to say is please come over and join us. We have a good time over there. We enjoy your comments. And also, the only saving grace today is Texas A&M loss. That's literally it. That's all I can say, because we're battling for these same recruits, and Texas A&M, it's kind of like the opposite of what it was last year. Texas A&M went 8-4. We went 5-7. I think there's a good chance we go 8-4 and they go 5-7. I think there's a really good chance that happens. So we could just be switching year after year, it seems like. But that's the only positive I can spin on this, Mark.
That's a positive. And also, I think people are at least understanding that, okay, Sark is in his second season, Jimbo Fisher's in his fifth season. There's a huge difference there, and a huge difference in expectations and what should be established at this point. So again, check out Matthew and Brandon. They're over on the Texas channel. They will be right here as well, meaning we have live streams that can be stacked up on one channel at the same time. So you can keep it right here, and you can click on Matthew and Brandon with Texas postgame, or head on over to the Texas channel and lock in on Texas postgame and bring your comments and your questions. I'm going to drop the link in the live chat so you can get right there as well. Matthew, appreciate you stopping by. Have a nice post-game show.
Thank you, Mark.
It's our guy, Matthew Miller, and we appreciate Matthew for a second straight season hosting the post-game show for Texas football. Longhorns go down to TCU 17-10. Are you embracing this TCU story? Okay, now they got by Texas. It's only Baylor, and it's only Iowa State in a Big 12 championship game. So that's still 3 more hurdles, but this was the one that most people were like, okay, that's it. They're going to Austin. Touchdown underdog in this one. They just keep it going. And they will be, regardless of what anyone thinks, that looks at recruiting rankings and NFL draft selections and wants to base playoff selections on that, this team is earning a playoff spot. All right, let's get back to the phone lines with Brian. Brian, how you doing tonight?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, what's going on, man? So Alabama, man, they baffled me. I was looking at their recruiting ranks, and they had the number 1 recruiting class the last cycle. They had the number 2 recruiting class before that, and then the 2 years before that, they had the number 1 recruiting class. So their talent is far better than, I would say, 95% of football. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. It's
But
far
yet
better than everyone not named Georgia or Ohio State. And if you want to throw LSU and Texas in there, but yeah.
Yet they're not playing at that level.
Not completely, but they're let's understand that yes, the talent is pillar number 1. That's the base, that's the foundation. You have to have talent. And if you're going to play at a high level, elite level, you have to have elite talent. You have to have it. Now, there's a number of schools that have blown awful, or they have blown having elite talent, like Texas, would be the prime example. So you got to coach them up, develop them, and all of that. And Alabama's done that better than anyone in college football. I know that they're not meeting expectations right now, but they did play a top 10 team in the country today, and they went on the road and won that game. The 2 games they've lost was on the last play of the game. Like I know
I
Alabama's
agree.
not playing quite where everybody would like them to play, but
I
I'm
guess
not
I think
that alarmed by what's going on at Alabama. They're still one of the 5 best teams in the country.
Oh, I agree. I guess here's where I'm going at. I feel like Nick Saban has kind of gone away from his model of my favorite style of Nick Saban football was the '09 to about I would say 2015/16,
Yep, sure.
where it was more it's a weird comparison, but it's more similar to what Michigan has been the past 2 years,
Sure.
where it's more ball control,
Yeah.
physicality in the trenches.
Yep.
It's run heavy, and the defense is elite. I kind of feel like I feel like they've gone away from that. If you look at their in the trenches,
well,
they're
yeah.
not as good.
Yes.
Yeah, and I almost wonder in this offseason, I wonder because Nick Saban, best coach of all time, I could see him, taking a kind of what Harbaugh did and kind of going back to his roots. I feel like he might do something like that.
Well, I think you've got a good point in that that's what he likes. That's what he enjoys. He made all sorts of comments at the time that they changed their offense that this is not what he wanted college football to be, but this is what it is. And therefore he was going to adapt to it. I would, so he may be thinking about, you're not going to get away from passing the football. You're not going to get away from wanting your athletes. If you're recruiting at the level of Alabama, you don't want to get away from an offense that is going to not utilize speed and space.
True.
Because that's your advantage. That's one of your advantages. So I get your point. I think it's a valid point. I believe that could be rumbling around in his head. I don't know that they're as pass heavy as people think they are. It's almost like Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's got a reputation for throwing the ball all over the place, but in fact, they run the ball more than anybody in the SEC.
Oh,
For
true.
the last 3 years. So I get your point. I think it's valid. But let's understand that for the first several years of doing that, once they changed over with Tua, then Mac Jones, that they were still winning championships like that.
No, that's true. And then
I think before you make your next point, I think your best point in all of that is that it's probably soften up their offensive lines. They are not run blocking, road grading, drive ahead minded offensive lines like they used to be.
Oh, 100%. And I had a epiphany with that today, and it related to the Michigan game. It's a trade-off thing, right? So when you focus on becoming a physical run team, another aspect's going to suffer a little bit. Like with Michigan, when you don't have those reps in the pass game, and you saw it today, they're a little off in the pass game. Michigan, they're not as for example, Ohio State. They drill that all year, right? So they're just proficient in the pass game. But where do they suffer? The run game. Same thing with Michigan, but in reverse, pass game. I don't know if you watched the game. Did you notice that today? They just seem like they're a little out of rhythm. Like they haven't been, because they run so much and they didn't drill in that pass game throughout the season. I feel like it's having that reverse effect where if you pass too much, it can affect your run game, but if you run too much, it can affect your pass game.
Yeah, I think there's a significance in terms of the difference of complexity and difficulty in just completing passes like in the flat and underneath routes versus getting the ball downfield. And I'm not talking about throwing deep bombs to the post, 8-9 routes. I'm talking about, mid-range passing attack. And the reason I say that is because up until last week, J.J. McCarthy was the quarterback with the highest completion percentage in college football. So that would lead you to believe that they were in the flow, they were in sync if they're connecting so much. But they're not connecting downfield. When they try to throw intermediate range to deep throws, they miss almost everything.
Yeah, and I put that a lot on you're not getting those consistent reps in game. And if you watch them through most of the year, they haven't been. This past couple weeks, they've been trying to. I give them credit for that, but it almost feels a little late. I mean, I guess it's better late than never to try to incorporate it. I just wish they had done it a couple games earlier because, you got the Ohio State game coming up, and you might need him to hit some downfield passes just to keep the chains moving.
Well, you probably will. Probably, although they won the game last year, and I can't remember too many real downfield throws.
That is true. And then
This Ohio State defense is better, though.
it is better, but I got an interesting point. I think they're better, but I don't know if you knew this. Did you know Ohio State had the 9th ranked rushing defense going into that game last year?
Into the Michigan game,
Yep.
I probably knew it at the time.
Yeah, I did some research. They had the 9th ranked rush. Don't get me wrong, they are better this year, but they also faced Oregon last year, and they faced Kenneth Walker going into that game. Yet they had the 9th ranked rush defense. I still think they're better this year, but I don't think they were as bad as people really kind of made them out to be. I think Oregon kind of out-schemed them. I don't think it was as much as them just actually getting beat up front. They were pretty good going into that game. Michigan just out-toughed them. Same with Penn State this year. Penn State has held every team to damn near under 100 yards in the run game. I think there's only 2 teams that have gone over 100 yards, yet Michigan ran for 400 yards on them.
Well, that's exactly what happened. If you watch the Oregon game, the difference between the Oregon game and the Michigan game was you continually didn't see Ohio State defenders even in the TV screen when they were playing Oregon. They did. They got completely out-schemed. They were out of position constantly. They were fooled. The Oregon would set the edge and there would be nobody. Oregon running backs were just running just out in open air, open space. The Michigan pounding was just straight ahead. Like Ohio State was in position to make tackles, and they made the tackles. The problem was they made the tackles after getting pushed and dragged downfield for 8 and 10 and 12 yards. They were making the tackle. They were right there. They just
bullied. And I think Jesse Manton needs to be up for the Burroughs Award, man. That defense is. I think Georgia's got the best defense, but I think Michigan's defense is right there. They got the number 1 rush defense, the number 1 total defense, and the number 1 scoring defense. They've outscored their opponents 117-3 in the last 5 games in the second half. They've allowed only 42 rush yards per game in Big Ten Conference, and they're going and 72 a year, but 42 per game. This defense, for losing 8 starters off and all that first round talent, to me, is one of the most impressive coaching jobs of the year. New coordinator, 8 new starters.
I hear you, man. Any other points tonight for me?
No, that's it, man. I think one more, I guess. I think Oregon losing. Oregon losing, and I think TCU is going to get in. I can't see them not getting in if they win out. I think Oregon losing, and maybe if USC loses, could open the door for that second Big Ten team. That would be my last point.
Well, that's what it would be.
So.
All right, Brian.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Appreciate you being here. Let's move it on. And we got one of our USC guys, the man who makes it all roll over at the USC channel and right here at the Voice of College Football on our Pac-12 show on Wednesday night. Of course, one Tony Altimore.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. Hey, so 2 things real quick. First, Tim and I just figured out we think there is a massive revenue opportunity that you are missing because we realized tonight this is not a sports call-in show.
I'm listening.
This is therapy for people whose teams lost. So if they could just upload their insurance card into StreamYard when they call in, you could get like $300 a call.
You got something there.
There you go. There's money. There's money to be made.
Yes, absolutely.
Seriously, we should think about that. You could just be Dr. Mark. I mean, that's like you're more legit than Dr. Phil. So no question.
Okay.
Hey, want to get your thoughts on the Wild game up north?
That was fun, wasn't it? That was
so much fun. The Ducks and the Dogs. I mean, guys, to anybody in the chat who doesn't know, that is a game. I mean, I wouldn't quite put it with Michigan, Ohio State because of the national implications, but like to those two states, they feel about each other pretty close to Michigan, Ohio State.
Oh, I think they may exceed it at times, actually.
They
I
hate
think
each
there
other.
might be, when you hear Ohio State, Michigan fans generally, I know that there are outliers, they talk more from a respect standpoint. The conversations I have with Washington and Oregon, whether it's bloggers or the fans, it's hate.
It's pure hate. They don't call it like rivalry. They call it hate week.
Yeah.
So it was a wild one. And I think it's served notice on the world that the Dogs are back. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is doing a bang up job.
Yeah, you could question their wins up till this one. You could always, we play that game. Well, how good are they then if they beat them, and who have they beaten? You could play that with Washington up until this one. Going into Autzen Stadium, that was an impressive showing.
Well, and Oregon will play it on the Bo Nix ankle injury on the bad series, and of course some dubious Pac-12 refs in the end. But what Pac-12 game doesn't have some dubious Pac-12 refs in the end?
I had some issues with that final call.
They
followed the letter of the law. That the call was made on the field, and then the replay officials. So I don't have an issue with. Sometimes I think that there are just bad rules or bad procedures. It's not that they're not executed properly. I just think in a situation like that, after I watched that play, I think, was he overtly forced out? Probably not. But I thought he established himself back in field. I thought he was back. I just thought he established himself back into the field before he caught the ball.
Yeah.
And, that was probably a game-winning field goal. He was down to the 20-yard line, or a game-tying field goal.
Yeah. And with Bo Nix back, I mean, Bo Nix isn't going to lose in overtime.
I don't think so.
Whatever kind of painkiller and cocaine mixture they stuck into his ankle. I'm just joking. Whatever they did to him in the medical tent that went from him being carried off the field to ready to go. But I mean, the other big question is do you think this changes how you look at Oregon coming up? We've got Oregon, Utah, and we've got Oregon State. Do you think this gives Utah and Oregon State? Do we look at this game differently?
Well, sometimes it gives the coordinators a blueprint, but those teams don't have Michael Penix. So some of that,
especially Oregon State,
in making throws that other guys can't make. I think it's a phenomenal comeback that this conference has made in totality, from top to bottom, but especially from those top five up. It's going to be a fun final games. I have been wrestling back and forth, Tony, leading into this weekend in regards to who had potentially the best resume of a college football playoff candidate between USC, UCLA, and Oregon. And I still believe that it's going to be USC. Not that they're going to make the playoff, but I think that they also have the best resume, with Notre Dame continuing to win. And that stretch drive for USC, for as much as been accomplished by USC to date, these final 3 games are more of an accomplishment than the first 9. These final 3 with a championship game if they make it. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, tell me your thoughts on this. And I know, apologies to all my Oregon friends, because I love you, and I know that there's every excuse in the world for the first Georgia-Oregon game. But that Georgia-Oregon game was, I feel like a terminal blood stain that just wasn't going to come out. And I thought it would put us in a bad situation, because quite honestly, when you lose 49-3 or whatever that was, you don't deserve a playoff spot. And even though we make every excuse in the world about, well, it was the first game and they've gotten so much better and Bo Nix has done great, he got the new coordinator. I mean, every reason in the world, I think it's better for the conference in a lot of ways to not have to keep talking about that game. And now Oregon is essentially done from the playoff discussion.
Yeah, and so it's USC in the spotlight, and USC has a formidable loss.
Better win.
A reasonable
or better loss. And UCLA has a better loss.
Yes.
So, but both they lost Oregon, but it's on the road. It was close. It was a good game, and even Utah, if they won't make the playoff, but winning the conference, they'll still look good if they find a way to win the conference. So, I think it's probably better for the conference, even though the Oregon fans are gonna kill me for that.
It is such a seriously backloaded schedule for all the contenders. We hit this week, and just the final 3 weeks into the championship game are just crazy.
Well, I don't know if you realized it, but this game tonight in Autzen was the very first game that one of the top 4 teams has lost anything at all to one of the bottom 8 teams. The top 4 were undefeated against the bottom 8 until about an hour ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know you got folks waiting, but definitely think about Dr. Mark, losing team therapist. There is good money there.
Tony, I can always count on you for coming up with the next great idea.
Thanks. And hey, everybody, this is a wild night in the pack. We got wild stuff going on in the Rose Bowl tonight, and we'll be talking about it Wednesday night right on this channel.
Absolutely. Thank you
Take
for
care,
all
Mark.
you do, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Tony Altamore, I tell you, if you see a good thumbnail on one of our team channels, that guy's responsible. And that's no surprise, because you see the Pac-12 chat show and you also see the USC show and all that he does there in sprucing up our product here at the Voice of College Football, something that I've been wanting to work on for a long, long, long time. All right, let's keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. Let's bring in, we've got Buckeye Mike is next up. Buckeye Mike, what's going on today?
So before I ask any questions, I want to give a shout out to the Marshall Thundering Herd for beating App State, which is something Michigan didn't do, and becoming bowl eligible. So it's definitely that.
Fan for bringing up a game from 15 years ago. Okay, I got you. All right.
I'm just kidding.
That's okay. That's why we're here, for you guys to take shots at each other.
I mean, hey, they always bring up crap from years ago. Like, I still hear stuff from about 69, and I wasn't even born.
Yeah, 69. My goodness. Yeah, that's
the 24-12 Bo's first year.
The 24-12. But that was losing to them. I don't really understand that.
What I mean. I keep, because people bring up about them losing to App State. Yeah. If it's Ohio State fans, they counter it usually with, "Oh, well, we beat you guys in 69. You guys were supposed to slaughter us."
Well,
it would have been a year after.
Go that far back. They won a lot of games between 1969 and actually the 96 game was a 17-point spread. Ohio State was supposed to slaughter them that year.
That's
I don't know if you were wrong for that one, but Sean Springs slipped and Ty Streets went to the house and Michigan won.
That's what I don't get. Like, why go to 69? Because it was Woody Hayes? Because there was almost every game in the 90s was a good upset for them.
Yeah, there were a lot of them.
I am glad I never witnessed that, because it's good to not see that as often. But I honestly am afraid that we're rounding back to that corner. Because as much as I don't like Michigan, they're getting better on a regular basis. And I can admit that with a straight face.
Okay, yeah, Michigan's getting better, meaning they're getting better this season week to week, or they're getting better from this season going back to last season?
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Is the production we're seeing from Michigan, is it just a class thing as far as the recruiting? Like, we're in the stretch of like the class of 21. I mean, the class of 25 or whatever, like these up and coming classes, or is it just that maybe Jim Harbaugh has finally figured it out and we're headed back to them, us, them, us, them, us, them kind of thing?
So you're talking about the current roster, the makeup of the current roster, and how good those classes are. Those classes aren't as good as Ohio State's classes. They're not even really close.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is, has he, with what classes he has and what he's
Yes.
trying to build off of, has he figured out his formula on?
He has rediscovered his formula.
Because I finally did
So
it.
let me clarify what I just stated, because I know some Michigan fans will be all over me to say, well, our recruiting's been really good and it's not that far behind Ohio State. Well, this is the reality of it. Ohio State's roster is one of the 3 best in the country. Michigan's roster is like 13th, something in that range. Okay. If you believe the recruiting rankings, which if you don't, then you don't get it. Because are they perfect? No. But are they very close? Yes. Especially when you talk about a whole roster. Yes, they're very close. So it's not hard for me to believe that Ohio State has one of the 3 most talented teams in the country and Michigan's 13th. Well, anyone that understands football and understands everything else that goes into coaching and game planning and all that can imagine that the 13th best team in the country could be able to play with the 3rd best team in the country. That's not that much of a stretch. However, the reason I say that there's a big gap between the 2 rosters, or a decided gap, is that the difference between number 3 and number 13 isn't the same as like 13 to 23. It's like the same as like 13 to like 45. The slots like cascade. If you look at the per player rating of the recruiting rankings, it falls off in a hurry after like 4, 5, 6, 7. Then it just. So my point is, and I'm not going to take credit for this because this was a conversation I had with Steve Dace a few weeks ago. And yeah, our guy Steve Dace. And he basically said that, and I completely agreed with him. And some of the things that I said actually kind of, we moved into this part of the conversation. And then he said, Jim Harbaugh has rediscovered his identity going back to Stanford. He basically has decided, I can't build an offense that can compete with Ohio State as another Ohio State offense. I don't recruit at their level to build an offense that's exactly like them. Why don't I go back to what we built at Stanford? And we played Oregon, and that was another classic matchup of styles. If anybody was watching those Oregon Stanford games from 10 years ago, they were hilarious to watch because Oregon was like in the space age and Stanford was in the prehistoric age. They had like linemen like lining up right next to each other and they just bulldozed ahead. And Oregon was the exact opposite. They had linemen who were lighter than Stanford's tight ends and fullbacks, getting out in space, blocking in space, and running everything that they did. So complete stylistic difference. And then it appears as though Jim Harbaugh is somewhat embracing that, making a physical offensive team that can do varied things on the outside with talented receivers, but the core of the offense is a physical offense.
Makes sense. I know it was Indiana. I know Indiana's bottom of the Big Ten, middle of the pack area. Did we fix or start to fix the run game, or did we just put a Band-Aid over it?
Well, as long as Mayan Williams is healthy, today's game was a really good sign, and this is why. If you look at Indiana's rush defense, it's actually really good. Northwestern came into that game 108th in the country in yards per play on the ground defensively. Indiana was 31st. They were close to the top 30 in the country in rushing average against their defense. So Ohio State was running against a pretty good running defense today. But this all rests on Mayan Williams. What happened to him? How healthy is he? If they don't have him, then it's really dicey.
Well, I mean, I know it was just one run, but holy crap! Shout out to Xavier Johnson.
Yeah.
Holy crap! So shout out to Cameron Babb too. That was a nice catch. That touchdown catch.
How late in the game was that? I checked out at like 28-7, 35-7, something like that.
It was like one of CJ's last touchdown passes.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
I mean, it was a basic CJ rolls out to the right. Cameron's following his. Basically, they're going parallel, and he's on the other side of the end zone line, and there's like just enough room for him to catch it and possess it and get 2 feet or 1 foot in. I mean, it's basically but just what he's been through, and like Fox talked about this for like 5 minutes, and I don't blame him, but I mean, he's been through so much just to finally get a touchdown catch. Man has heart. What in the world was Dan Lanning thinking on that 4th and 1 at your own? What was it?
I don't know. Especially when, according to Brock Heward and the play-by-play guy, Bo Nix was ready to come into the game.
Yeah.
Like he was jumping up and down, and they put him in right after that. They put him in on the next series. So he was apparently healthy and ready to go. So he should have been in there anyway. I don't know what he was thinking.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because I watched most of Uncle Lou's broadcast at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I had it on the TV, but I was listening to him, and he was basically like, "What the crap? Like, how stupid are you?" I do agree with you that the refs kind of blew that call at the end of the game. I think they should have just, I mean, like you said, by the letter of the law, because we don't have the proper freaking camera angle down the sideline.
Yeah.
By the letter of the law, I guess he went out under his own. But I mean, I've seen, as I'm sure you have, worse called on less. Like the targeting on Ward against Maryland in 2017.
I would just like to have the players decide the game. And if he's stepping out by a blade of a grass, I think it's more important that the defensive back did not stop him from catching the ball, and he caught the ball inbounds with 2 feet. He only needs 1, of course, but with 2 feet, and got out of bounds. And so he made a play. I just.
Yeah, because basically, like, where's my camera? If this is your foot, he may have only been out like that much, like from here over being out of bounds line, and you're gonna penalize him for. I mean, technically there was fault there on the defender. Like, in my opinion, I don't think he went out on his own because he had enough contact with the defender. He basically rubbed the defender, caused the contact, went out of bounds.
Yeah.
And came back in.
You can see him make contact with the defender, and it kind of steered him, like pushed him like kind of off balance, and he went barely out of bounds. And then I still think he reestablished himself in bounds. So I don't like to see the officials get in the way. I want them to make a call when it's decided or blatant. Like the dude's running out of bounds. Like he stepped out of bounds. He's trying to avoid a defender by running around out of bounds. So, you're not eligible. You ran out of bounds. You took a big step out of bounds. I just don't like to see games decided like that. I hate it.
I'm all for, close nail biting games. Unless it's Michigan, then I just want to stomp a mud hole in them. But sort of. But yeah, I mean, as a fan of college football, I'm all for the close games.
Well, that's like
They're all
earlier in the LSU Arkansas game. So by the letter of the law, if a quarterback's arm or hand is moving forward, then he's throwing the ball. So if a quarterback got his hand and arm cocked all the way back and he just starts to move it and somebody knocks the ball out of his hand and then he just kind of goes like that without the ball, it's a forward pass. So the officials, the LSU defensive line are Harold Perkins. Guy's a phenomenal player. Anyway, it was a key point in the game. And fortunately, LSU still won, but I thought it was clearly a fumble. But since the letter of the law says so, the officials didn't screw it up. They can only call what's in the rule book. I just think it's a bad rule. It's just a stupid rule because this is not throwing a pass. When I've got a ball in my hand and it gets hit out of my hand and I throw an empty hand out, that's not a pass. It's a fumble.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Time it just right and smack his hand when he's back here?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like the famous Tuck rule.
oh my God.
The stupidest thing that I've ever come across in my life, and I'll only go on one little more rant here, that whoever decided in some boardroom at the NFL that if you've decided that you want to throw, and then you decide, no, I'm going to tuck the ball back because that means I'm not going to throw, and it gets knocked out of your hand, that's a pass. How's that a pass? You decided not to throw. I tucked the ball. That's why it's called a tuck. I tucked the ball back in because I decided not to throw. That's a fumble.
It's wow. So two last things here for you. One, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, you did a video on one of Michigan's problems being the red zone. Do you still believe that, or do you, like I thought you said in the Michigan-Nebraska halftime video today, that it was the deep ball from McCarthy?
Okay.
Or do you think it's both?
Okay, so my issue with Michigan against Michigan State in the red zone was not that they weren't capable of converting in the red zone, but they chose not to. It was like once they had a 10 or 15 point lead, they were okay with getting the ball in the red zone and then saying, you know what, it's 3rd and 7, we're running the ball. And most likely we're not going to get it. But if Blake Corum breaks it, great, we'll keep running and we'll maybe score a touchdown. But we're not going to risk anything and we'll just keep kicking field goals. And they kicked 1 million field goals in that game. They kicked 5 field goals in that game because they just got in the red zone and they got conservative and they didn't trust their quarterback. And I think that's a losing mentality, but I understand because Harbaugh's like, we got a great running game, got a great defense. We're not risking anything. I'd rather just kick the field goal. So it wasn't so much that I thought that they were not executing or ineffective in the red zone. I thought it was more from a coaching and play calling standpoint that they were not effective in the red zone. Now, today, I didn't sit there and watch every Michigan-Nebraska play. I'm always trying to watch about 3 games at the same time. But I saw every time Michigan take a shot downfield, it's like they're just guessing. It's like maybe I'm making too much of a comparison between Ohio State and CJ Stroud, who actually, not that he doesn't miss some passes, he missed a few today, but when he's on, it looks like it's Aaron Rodgers out there versus just kind of like hoping, just throwing the ball downfield and hoping. Like they're just not in sync anytime they throw the ball downfield.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh no, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, all right, Mike, anything else?
Yeah, one last thing.
Okay.
And you can respond to this really quick. But USC, with where they're at now, because I don't think they were very good last year. probably average.
USC, you said?
Mhm.
They were awful. Yeah, 4-8.
Yeah. Are they just exceeding expectation? Or is this like a fluke year because the team is just stacked because of everybody that he brought over? Or are we actually back to when I loved USC, the Bush, Leinart, Carroll era?
Well, this team is nowhere close to those teams. Those teams had NFL defenses. This team has a pretty bad defense, but they've got like a few guys smattered around on defense that are really good players, but the defense collectively is not good. The offense is really good. The offensive line's really good. It's not deep. They can't afford to lose many of those guys. The skill position players, exceptional. Running back, okay, not great. It's mostly quarterback, receivers, and about 3 or 4 defensive players
Mhm.
is what they got. That is top shelf. They're not as good as their record. They've played a weak schedule. Their best win's Oregon State. Their second best win is Washington State. Those are their 2 best wins. So we're going to see the next 3 weeks. They've got UCLA, Notre Dame, and a Pac-12 championship game. So they've got 3 top 10 opponents to play the next 3 weeks. Or, well, not Notre Dame, but Notre Dame playing much better. So they're a good team. They're an explosive team. They're a talented team in spots, but they're not. They got to recruit out of their minds for another 2 cycles to be anywhere in the Pete Carroll dynasty range. But they're explosive. They're dangerous. Their record's a little bit of a. It's not a fluke. I don't want to say it's a fluke. They haven't fluked their way into this record. They've just their schedule's been light.
Okay.
They're one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country.
So, I mean, with that being the case, and their 2 best wins currently,
Yeah.
does that like how does that put into perspective the Utah loss, or is that gonna be determined by how they finish the year? I mean,
In
to
terms of making
me,
the
it is
playoffs?
a 1-point loss.
Are
But
you
at the
thinking
same
about the
time,
playoffs?
what?
Are you thinking about the playoffs? Is that why you're asking?
No, I'm just because I feel like with Oregon losing, which
Yeah.
I didn't predict it on a video, but I did predict they would lose to Washington. With them losing, I feel like the Pac-12 is just out of the playoffs now. Like they, as Uncle Lou said, crap the bed and lost themselves out of the playoffs.
Well, what I was saying earlier to somebody is the Oregon USC comparison is you can take either side in that in terms of who would have a better playoff resume, because they generally play the same schedules. Once we get to the point in the season in which we're at the end of the year, their schedules are roughly the same. They didn't play each other. I would say Oregon's was slightly tougher in conference because they had to play Washington and USC did not. And Oregon still had to play Utah and UCLA just like USC did, and Oregon State. So I'd say that the conference schedule is slightly tougher for Oregon, but not by much, but that one game. But USC's playing Notre Dame in a few weeks. That's going to be a good win on their resume. And obviously, if they don't lose the game, our discussion's null and void. So they have to win the game, where Oregon got blasted by Georgia. So USC has the potential to have a better, even if Oregon would have won this game, a better playoff resume, because they've got a 1-point loss at a very difficult place to play at Utah. I want to say Utah finishes 10-2. A 10-2 Utah team on the road by 1 point, 2-point conversion, controversial plays, the whole deal, while Oregon got slaughtered. And USC played Notre Dame non-conference. Okay.
All good.
All right, Buckeye Mike.
Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and use the Amazon link in honor of J-Dub. I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate that, man. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, let's keep it moving here. Reasonable Gump has been very patient. How's it going tonight?
As you said, Mark, I'm both the reasonable person and the patient guy here.
It's good to be patient. It's a
And
virtue.
it's not really a family trait of mine either.
Well,
so I just sort of
that's why you can work on it here.
Sometimes you make me work for it. You know who else makes me work for it is the entire population on Alabama's locker room. But enough about that. Hey, Mark, I got a question for you. This is going to be a guessing game, all right?
Yeah. All right.
Why don't you take a guess? What have I gotten the most enjoyment out of this whole college football season?
Oh boy.
I'll go ahead and knock one out for you. It has absolutely nothing to do with Alabama. Alabama has caused me no enjoyment at all.
Of course not, because you expect perfection, and this
Well, I just
year
expect
is not
something good.
Okay. And I was not going to go there because I kind of know where you're headed. So it's got to be number one, that Texas A&M's falling flat on their face.
Nailed it.
Right? Jimbo, Texas A&M, right?
Well, I want to hear your other guesses.
My other guess would be, I had it here. Hang on. Jimbo. Oh, you hate Notre Dame and Tennessee. I thought I had another one in the SEC.
You could honestly just pick three fingers and say Jimbo, and Jimbo.
Okay, I got it. All right. Yeah, they're awful. They lost to Auburn tonight, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they did. And do you remember when Florida played Miami in the opening, like week 0, and what a drunken bar fight of a game that was?
Sure, I was there.
Yeah, you were there, actually. Yeah, I remember that. This was a lot like that. Texas A&M had negative 16 yards of offense in the third quarter.
Looking it up. Okay.
And
negative
Auburn,
16 in
negative
a quarter.
16.
Good.
I think they had, 80-something for the whole second half?
See, this is where I believe, this is just my theory, that what makes these coaches so successful, which is a lot of ego, which thinks that they can do anything, they know everything, and I think that's a great trait in a sense, to a limited place, that they also think, in Jimbo's case, that he knows better how to run an offense than anyone, and he knows best. Nobody else can run the offense. And to take himself away from that and think, you know what? I am killing myself here. I can still be the head coach at Texas A&M and still get all this credit when we win the SEC, but why don't I go get myself an offensive mind that can run this offense? But
hopefully Nick Saban has a similar thought at the end of this year. But, so Mark, you were talking about the rosters of Michigan versus Ohio State, and you said something like Michigan's got like the 13th roster or something.
Yes.
So Texas A&M, of course, had that great recruiting class last year. But even before that, they were getting like the 5th or 6th or something, on an annual basis. So you got to think they're a top 5 roster. Something like that.
There's a composite that the 247 Sports people put together.
Okay. I don't have it in front of me.
Making that up. That's their taking the entire roster that's still at Alabama, for example, whoever started 2017 through 21, they add it all up, and it's almost like a recruiting ranking, but it takes the entire roster into account.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I see the irony. The irony is not lost on me that I'm sitting here talking about another team not living up to their talent expectations. I get it, everyone listening. Okay, Alabama has no right to be struggling this much on offense every week.
There's still an enormous gap between what the way Texas A&M struggling and an Alabama team that has lost 2 games to 2 of the 5 best teams in the country on the last play of the game on the road.
LSU, but 5 best team in the country, huh?
Top 5 or 6. Yes, somewhere like that.
Yeah. The getting destroyed by Tennessee wasn't a good look at home.
No. People
But
thought
anyway,
Oregon was that good up until a few hours ago, and they got destroyed by Georgia much worse than that.
Yeah, true. But it's just astounding to me, though. Because, like I'm saying, Texas A&M's got to have at minimum, a 6th best talent perspective roster in the country, and they cannot move the ball to save their life. I watched that Auburn Texas A&M game for the very reason you guessed, was where I'm getting my therapy this entire season.
There were so many good games tonight.
It's a terrible game to watch, but I'm just like, they cannot move the ball to save their life. I mean, it's astounding, honestly. And the thing, you know what the funny part about it at the end of the game, Mark? They had negative 16 yards of offense in the third quarter, and Auburn still had to survive an onside kick to win. That's how bad of a game it was.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering, with all the good games on tonight, that you were watching that one.
Well, as I told you, that's been my source of therapy for this whole season. So
I'm looking at the box score right now. Yeah, 14 for 36 for a $121 through the air. It's pretty awful.
Well, anyway, Mark, so playoff teams, what do you think? Is TCU going to get in?
I have been predicting their demise just based on them continuing to squeeze their way by. But tonight's effort was against the most talented team and the team that most people had targeted as the one that was going to trip them up, including me. Not that I was surprised by them winning, because Texas always screws up. But Baylor's going to be a challenge next week. Baylor's a decent team. And TCU's not a team that can just, like, if Baylor was playing Ohio State or Tennessee or Georgia next week, I'd say, they're going to get killed. But TCU plays close against almost everybody. Like, everybody's capable in that league of playing them within 10 points. Everybody is. West Virginia's the worst team in the league, and they were only down by 3 points with a minute left in the game. So that's how TCU just plays. They're really not that good. Right. I give them all of the credit in the world for finding a way to win all these games, but they're really not that good. So they could lose to Baylor. Iowa State, that would be a stretch for them to lose that game, although they arguably have the best defense in the league. Then they're going to have to see, this is the caveat that nobody else has to deal with. They have to beat a team that they already beat in the championship game.
Yeah.
Which is kind of tough to do.
Was kind of hoping we might have been able to play ourselves into a situation like that, but wasn't meant to be. So if it comes down to, and I know your personal philosophy is that you like conference champions.
Yes.
But I wonder, do you think would the committee, would they take like an undefeated TCU over like a 1-loss Tennessee? Or Michigan, for that matter?
Tennessee will have the better resume.
Much better resume.
Yes.
Or Michigan.
I don't know, because we have a committee that's been together for the committee itself has been in play for 8 years going on. Is this the 9th? No, this is the 8th. No, this is the 9th. But they haven't been the same people. So the pillars, the tenants, the whatever you want to call them, the conditions are changing. If we could both sit in that room, what we would see, I think, is we would see both ends of the spectrum. We'd see one end of the spectrum where we would just see kind of the geek approach that the metrics say, these are the 4. Then you'd have on the other end, you'd have, I'm a football coach, or I used to be, and I watch these games and I can tell you who the best teams are. Here they are. And then you've got somewhere in the middle, and that's not a consensus, obviously, that top 25. I explained that to somebody the other day that was arguing with me, and I said, the committee they don't have a consensus on the 25 best teams in the country. They vote themselves. So if we only knew where they really stand, each individual on these teams. So, but I think the one thing that's been fairly consistent is they're very resume driven.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee just has a better resume than TCU. They've got two of the best wins in the country, like two of the top 3 or 4. But I got to think that they're going to honor a conference champion with its undefeated. I
don't think they've ever left out an undefeated Power 5 champion.
No, they have not.
And in this case, it would be, in this particular scenario, it would be in lieu of a team that didn't even play, that didn't even win their division.
Yes.
Now I know that that needs to be taken in context. Tennessee is better than any team in the Western Division. Obviously, they beat both of the two, the top teams, and one of them they beat running away.
Yeah, we think they are.
Well, I mean, they proved it on the field. They are.
Yes, by your logic, which I completely agree with, based on the results on the field. I don't necessarily think that they're better than Alabama, but that it doesn't matter what I think. You're right. They won the game. Yes.
Well, that would be interesting. Okay, because Clemson sort of, I'm not sure if they knocked themselves all the way out, but we honestly could end up with 2 Big Ten and 2 SEC teams in the playoff. The way it's
We
looking right now.
could, because the other thing that the committee has shown us is that they punish a bad loss.
They do.
Either a team that's not very good or in a blowout, and Clemson kind of did both.
Right.
Notre Dame's okay, but one of those Ohio State teams had much better wins than Oklahoma, but they lost to Purdue by 4 scores, so they were done.
Right,
And
exactly.
so the committee,
and the one where they lost to Iowa and they gave up 50 to Iowa.
Yeah.
Something.
Yep.
Oh, and the one where Penn State won the Big Ten, but they got left out because they lost to Michigan. They gave up 50 or something.
Well, they lost 2 games.
They're still the conference champion.
Yeah, conference champion, and they beat Ohio State head to head.
Right.
So yeah, they're going to punish that. Yeah, I want chaos. I was rooting for Ole Miss today for 2 reasons: that Alabama wins enough, and they just win enough. So that was one reason I was rooting for Ole Miss. But I was also rooting for Ole Miss because I wanted them to run the table, and the committee just to have to squirm even more with LSU if they won the SEC championship game, which they're not going to, I don't believe. But if they did, LSU's the SEC champion with 2 losses. Georgia's got a loss. Tennessee's got a loss, and Ole Miss is 11-1 as well. I would have loved to have them have to sort through that, in addition to everything else that's going on.
I actually think if we ended up with a 2-on-2 SEC Big Ten, that would kind of be interesting, because they're just going to do 1 versus 1, 2v2. They'd match Ohio State. Presumably, let's say Ohio State wins the Big Ten. They'd match Ohio State with Georgia and Tennessee with Michigan. That'd be kind of fun.
Well, I think that a lot of college football fans would love that. But if we're sitting here 5 years from now and USC and UCLA maybe add a lot to the Big Ten, and Texas and Oklahoma add a lot to the SEC, and they start to really dominate the sport, then people are going to get sick of that. But for a novelty and for seeing those kind of brands play, I think most people would be kind of intrigued to see, okay, yeah, let's see Ohio State and Michigan against the 2 best teams in the SEC.
Yeah.
I think most people would be on board with that.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, I'm a week late with this, but it won't take long. So 2 years ago, I asked you this, and I just want to see if your memory's still good.
Okay.
The Commander-in-Chief's Cup, Air Force won it last week.
Yes.
Which academy has won it the most times?
When did it start?
1972.
That's going to help me. Okay, it's not Army then. I'm going to say Navy. Oh, It's probably Air Force.
It is Air Force.
Yeah. Because I was, Fisher to Barry, Ken Hatfield. Yes. Air
Mhm.
Force. Yeah.
Although it took Air Force 12 years to win it after it started.
Oh,
So
okay.
the other two,
Yeah, but in
Navy,
the 80s. Yeah.
Navy was definitely building a commanding lead, but then Air Force took over in the 80s and 90s. And
Yeah. And Army probably has very few of them because
They
they
have
were
n-
awful for
so it's Air Force 21, Navy 16, and Army 9. Yeah.
21, 16, 9. Okay. Interesting.
Just thought I'd give a shout out. I'm an Air
Yes,
Force guy.
I will tuck those numbers away.
All right.
I can
That's all I
stick them
got.
up there. All right, Reasonable Gump.
Good talking with you.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man.
Well.
All right. Austin's on the line. That's because I double clicked, or I didn't double click. This is what happens when somebody clicks himself out and I click them at the same time. Anyway, here we are, Austin. So you're next up, I guess. How you doing?
Mark, it was a rough day in the Ville. Clemson brought it.
Not unexpected.
No, I knew Clemson was going to be ready for this week because they were coming off that loss to Notre Dame. They had the media and everybody was giving them flack for it, and they knew we were going to be their punching dummies to take it out on. We held on as long as we could, but Clemson was just too much at the end. And they just ran the ball down our throat.
You didn't have your quarterback in the second half. Correct?
Yeah, we didn't have him in the second half, but
yeah,
still, we looked abysmal on offense, Mark. It was awful.
Well, you can always take some solace in that Kentucky was awful today too, and you play them in 2 weeks.
Yeah, this is true. And Mark, I will say I am really proud of our defense because in years past, our defense would have just rolled over and quit. We didn't quit today. I'm really proud of the team for that. We didn't do that today.
Maybe you would be less proud of your defense if you've watched Clemson play offense the rest of the season.
True, probably. But, well, Mark, let's not dwell on Louisville. We got other games to discuss.
All right.
TCU, Texas.
Yes.
What'd you think of it, Mark? Because this was a game like you said that TCU could slip up possibly.
Sure.
Now that they got over this Texas hump.
Yeah.
Is there any roadblocks left in their way?
Yes. Every game is a roadblock for TCU. Every game is a roadblock for TCU. So once TCU got through their cream puff non-conference schedule of Colorado and Tarleton, wherever that is, and SMU, every game has been difficult for TCU. Kansas State, Oklahoma, everybody. West Virginia is the worst team in the league. And it was 34-31 with a minute left in the game. Every game has been difficult for TCU. So every game will probably most likely continue to be difficult for TCU. So they've got Baylor next week, and I believe they go on the road. I don't know. They've got Baylor next week. Iowa State could be a relatively easy game. Could be. And they're going to have to beat somebody in the Big 12 championship game that they've already beaten, which is difficult to do. So they're not out of the woods. This was a huge hurdle tonight, but they're not out of the woods.
And the thing too, Mark, that I always wonder with a team like TCU who didn't have the best of non-conference schedules, and when they win these gutsy games like they did tonight, and then like against West Virginia and they win that game, how much of these games does it hurt their standings when the committee looks at it and says you didn't win this game by a certain amount or you won it just by the skin of your teeth? How much does that hurt TCU compared to the other teams ahead of them or behind them, however you want to look at it?
Well, I'm hoping if they win the Big 12 championship and are undefeated, I don't care if they won every game by 1 point. They should be in the college football playoff. So hopefully the committee shares that thought. because winning the game should mean everything. And they do play in a decent conference, and it's a very balanced conference, and they're winning the game. So I'm just evaluating their level of play and showing that they've been fortunate. But regardless, they keep winning the game. So as long as they do that, and even as a one-loss Big 12 champion, they should be given heavy consideration. But as a zero-loss, undefeated Big 12 champion, they should just get a check mark. Go right in. We don't even evaluate you. You won your conference and you won every game. You're in. That's the way it should be. There should be no evaluation on TCU if they are undefeated.
And that's a fair thing to say because TCU did what they were supposed to. But Mark, as we've seen in years past, though that a conference champion has been left out before with one loss to an unbeaten Notre Dame team.
Not with zero losses. They would be the first.
That is true. And Mark, another thing, the Pac-12, they keep hurting themselves in terms of trying to get into the playoffs. Oregon, they look like they had that game won, and then Washington pulled it off at the end. My goodness. I mean, Washington, they hit their stride.
Yeah, Dan Lanning made what I think was a pretty critical error in judgment for whatever reason. And Bo Nix got hurt. And it was a great game. It was a phenomenal game. And it's a very balanced league at the top between those 4 to 5 teams. They're all really good.
And the thing that I question too is USC the only team now out of the Pac-12 that can make it, considering everyone else has got 2 losses now?
Probably.
Or does the conference title discussion still keep some of those other teams alive?
Well, Utah's lost 2 games and Oregon have lost 2 games. They're not going to the playoff. UCLA doesn't have a non-conference win on its schedule that's worth anything. So it's going to be difficult for them from a resume standpoint. So UCLA, this is what USC has on UCLA. Number one, they have a impressive, if you will, or good loss on the road at a difficult place to play in Utah by 1 point and the committee's supposed to be taking all these factors into consideration. Difficult place to play on the road, 1 point game, 2 point conversion at the end, controversial plays, all of that versus UCLA getting largely dominated, controlled against Oregon. So USC has a much better loss than UCLA. Plus, they will have a win against Notre Dame as a quality non-conference opponent, and UCLA has nothing like that. So USC's got a better resume, or will in a few weeks.
So therefore, if USC happens to win the Pac-12, it would be hard to leave them out?
Will it be hard to leave them out?
Like if it comes between them and a one-loss Big Ten and, say, Tennessee, and they're the Pac-12 champions, would it be hard to say that those other two could possibly be put in over USC because they did win the Pac-12, or would Tennessee's win over Bama just trump everything?
Let's start with conference champions. The SEC champion and the Big Ten champion, barring some kind of chaos in the Big Ten, the SEC and the Big Ten champions are going to be in the playoff. The Big 12 champion, if it's TCU and they're undefeated, they're going to be in the playoffs. So then there's only going to be one spot, and that's going to go to the ACC winner with 1 loss, or Tennessee, or USC. And the committee will make that comparison between those 3. The SEC could really muck things up if LSU goes on a run and they beat Georgia in the championship game. So that's going to hurt or pretty much kill the Pac-12.
So there is a possibility that a one-loss Pac-12 champion can get left out. So it's not certain if USC wins it that
it's probable
that they're in. And
it's probable that they get left out. It's probable that either the ACC champion or the Pac-12 champion with one loss, or the Big 12 ACC or Pac-12 champion, one or two of those three get left out with one loss.
That's really interesting, because I just find that really interesting, the fact that you can have a one-loss conference champion get left out over an SEC or Big Ten or the other conference champion.
Well, think of it this way, Austin. This is not probable, but it's not far-fetched that there could be 3 teams in the SEC, 2 teams in the Big Ten, and then 1 team each in the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC that have worthy resumes to be considered for the playoffs. So how many teams is that? That's 2, 5, 8 teams for 4 spots. Now, most likely it's not going to come to that, but probably going to be like 6 teams that have to be compared for 4 spots.
Yeah, that would make it really challenging on the committee, because then they have to go down through all the laundry list of who you lost to, who you've beaten, who's your non-conference, and then, like you said Tennessee would probably win out if they're in that scenario because they beat Alabama, right?
They would win out if the committee is going to, if they're going to prioritize resume above everything else. All right, Austin. Anything else, sir?
No, thank you for your time, Mark. And God bless. Have a good night. Go Cards.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night. All right, let's go to Tim.
What's up, Mark? Let's get can we get Joey in here as well? We want to talk about J-Dub.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Joey, good to have you. Good to have you.
Nice to be here, guys. Yeah, so Mark, I guess you announced about J-Dub passing away.
Absolutely. I expressed my thoughts and feelings for the first few minutes of the show.
Yeah. But, I think we all love J-Dub and things. And, when I found out this morning that he passed away, he passed away last Sunday. So it was, it just took somebody, Traveling Fools had called me and said, hey, if we all pitch in a little bit, maybe we can get some flowers for J-Dub and send him to the hospital and get him some dancers or something to cheer him up. So he got to checking around for things and found out that J-Dub had passed away last Sunday. So, it was really hard. It's been a rough day about that.
I didn't know anything until you and 2 other people contacted me today. I didn't even know he was sick.
He went in the hospital last Friday, not this past Friday, but Friday before last. And, wasn't feeling well. And the only thing he said to me, because he had called me Saturday morning and told me he was in the hospital. He said, I'll be in here for a day or two and I'll be out. That's all he told me. And I said, okay, J-Dub, I'm praying for you, hope everything goes well. And then he passed away Sunday. So, but it's been a rough day. So anyway, Tim, you want to add to anything, everybody?
Well, no, I mean, I've only been here in this community for about a year and a half ish. Mark was my gateway drug to get into this crazy community of football guys. But I saw J-Dub on all the shows. If it wasn't here, it was on Pete's show or it was on Uncle Lou. He's just all over the place with Golden Blue Dude even, and then also with Traveling Fools. And there wasn't much I agreed with Jeff on. Jeff, love him. Big time SEC honk. Complete Pac-12 hater. We go back and forth. But there's one thing about J-Dub that was so awesome is he's just a genuinely nice guy, and so much information in one human being. Just listening. We used to play trivia night, and this guy would just wipe the floor with most people. And just hearing the stories over on Traveling Fools channel just now, talking about like how he was a photographer, for Iowa State, I believe. The guy he used to do hilarious commercials on trivia night for us. Just a great, he had a great radio voice in general. I just like listening to J-Dub talk. And although we argued like brothers almost, like older brother, little brother, it was always fun talking to that guy because he came. At least you didn't. When he came with a lot of knowledge. A lot of times you argue with people and they're just dumb as dirt. You know, even though I didn't agree with Jeff, I knew that I was going to get, at least a lot more information. I might not agree, but I knew it was a great conversation. So I'm going to miss that guy a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of people asking in chat who he was a fan of. J-Dub was an Alabama fan. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide one time for Jeff. And he was an Alabama fan, but he was a photographer in the state of Iowa. He took photographs for Iowa State football, and sometimes Iowa too, I believe. He got called to do that. So, he was a great guy, just a great guy all the way around. But if you ever heard somebody in here talking about Ames, Iowa, then J-Dub. Because he always talked about Ames, Iowa, which is where he lived. So, he was a good guy. So, and I remember one time on a stream, we were streaming live over on Golden Blue Dude, and it was on a Sunday show, and he was in there with me, and he had talked for probably 5 minutes nonstop, telling the story that could have been told in 30 seconds. And I was like, J-Dub, man, you're putting me to sleep, dude. I gotta stop you there, man. I gotta put you out because you're putting me to sleep. So J-Dub was known for his long stories and things, and I'll miss those stories. I really will. I'll miss those stories. So.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when it was, but at whatever point he found our show and started calling, then he just was here like every night over and over and over and calling consistently, which was great. And I really appreciate that, he would never leave a phone call without letting everybody out there know that they need to support and kind of emphasize, what I was trying to get accomplished. And he would sell that Amazon link in a different creative way every time. He'd kind of talk about, oh, it's this time of year. You're probably doing some gardening. So what you want to do is, and I wish I could do the voice because he had some kind of like a
unique voice,
Harvey kind of delivery, like this kind of old style radio delivery.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Perfect radio voice. Just perfect. So
that's why he did those radio adverts just perfectly on Tribal Fool Show. He did his radio stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
But just wanted to call in and just talk a little about Jeff. Again, he's a great guy, and in my eyes, a huge part of this community because this place that's not all these channels won't be the same without him. And you can always count on.
And it's
agree
really,
or disagree.
it's a really weird feeling because I can't think of another time, and I'm sure I would know it. So this would be the first time that somebody that's called here and been part of the community and called on a regular basis has passed away. And just thinking, okay, well, we just spoke, 10 days ago or whatever, and he's no longer here with us. Just too bad, sad.
Yeah. Now, on a lighter note, I got to come back to something else too, there, Mark. West Virginia is not the worst team in the Big 12. They're no longer at number 10. They are in 8th now in the Big 12, in front of Oklahoma and in front of Iowa State. Iowa State is 1-6. Oklahoma's 2-5. West Virginia's 2-5. West Virginia beat them today, head to head. So we are 8th.
There is the technical standing. There's the standings, and then there's also an evaluation of the standings. So, West Virginia,
if you want to
played that last place team just last week, and they were 17 points worse than they were.
But West Virginia just beat Oklahoma, so that puts them ahead of them, right?
Yeah, puts us ahead of Oklahoma. Puts us ahead of Iowa State, who only has 1 win in the Big 12.
Okay.
So. Hey,
arguably,
it's not all for nothing. Arguably, hey, Mark, I just pulled your chain, man. We are without a doubt the worst team in the Big 12 this year.
Well, but that is a good win, though, today. I know Oklahoma's not Oklahoma, but I watched a lot of that game, and you guys pulled it out. Garrett Green was all fired up the last couple of first downs he got. Man, he was pumping his fist, and
Hey, Garrett Green, man, he had an awesome day. Matter of fact, I've got his stats here. I'd like to show you some of his stats. It was unreal because I got to find them first. What I did with them, man. He had a great. He had like 119 yards. He had 119 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, and his passing was tremendous. He had another touchdown passing, 120 yards passing, I believe. And that was just in a half. He only played second half, so that's pretty good. JT Daniels, man, he was horrible today. Threw an interception and throwing the balls over everybody's heads, throwing the balls in the ground. I mean, I don't know what's going on with JT, but he's not the same quarterback he was at USC back in 2019. He's just not.
I don't think he has the same receivers that he had at USC in 2019.
No, he don't. But I'm serious.
Receivers.
I'm serious. 3 times today, he had a receiver right like within 10 yards of him that he overthrew him twice and threw it in the ground once. And these are wide open receivers just standing there waiting on the ball. He threw it over their head and at the ground. Twice he done it over their head and once at the ground. Landed it, one hopped it right into the receiver. I don't know what role.
Neil Brown.
Maybe.
And you know what? 10 weeks in, I kind of said, caveat emptor for you with Graham Harrell.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, what's your report card for Graham Harrell 10 weeks in?
I think, well, my report card on Graham Harrell can't be positive, but that can't be negative either because I don't know how much Neil Brown's letting go of the reins. I still see a lot of Neil Brown, those bubble screens. I hate them damn bubble screens. And he throws them every other play. We got a bubble screen. And it's ridiculous. So I think that Neil Brown's still influencing our offense. And that's a problem. You need to let go of it and let Graham Harrell call. Because you can see we're not throwing the ball down the field. We had two deep passes today. They were both incomplete, really. So, you've got to release your offense coordinator, allow him to do that stuff, allow him to call some plays. I don't like a head coach trying to be the offensive coordinator at the same time. And unfortunately, we've got that again.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I've been in the chat for a little bit here, and I'm seeing that a 12-1 USC. I'm saying because I don't know if they beat UCLA. I don't know if they beat Notre Dame and then possibly a rematch. I'm hoping best case. So here's my scenario for you out there in the chat and for both of you guys. USC wins out, and Utah ends up being the number 2 team, and they rematch, and SC beats Utah on a neutral field. What does that do for a committee's decision on, let's say, a second SEC team or a second Big Ten team or I do agree an undefeated TCU is getting in over USC. And unfortunately, I agree, especially it sucks. If TCU is undefeated, I think they should go. Even though I don't have much respect for the Big 12 this year, if you go undefeated and you're a Big 5 champ, a Power 5 champ, then you should get in. But I'm not too sure now about see, my point is sure you're 12-1. Or sorry, 11. Sorry, you'd be 11-1. So 11-1, but you're not your conference champ. Why again are you going to or 12-1? Why are you going to the playoffs when you didn't even win your conference? Someone's telling me on that one.
About my criteria or the committee's criteria? The committee's criteria is that conference championships are just one criteria. It's not the criteria.
Correct, but so you have equal records. Relatively equal schedules, because if USC does do that, beats Notre Dame,
yes,
beats UCLA, as much as people want to land-based Oregon State's a good team, and they will finish in the top 25, and they will win their bowl game. Like I was earlier talking about Kentucky playing OSU.
You're predicting a bowl game that you have not seen scheduled yet.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I've seen that defense. Well, I'm saying who they're going to play. They're not going to be playing one of the top teams in the country. And I've seen Oregon State play some really good teams to the wire in the Pac-12.
All right.
Yeah. So it would be interesting. But my question is, you have a 12-1 conference champ, and then you have a 12-1 team that did not win their conference. You still give the nod to a team that didn't even win their conference?
I don't.
No, I don't. Yeah. I don't. I think so. You're saying like let's say
matter.
So you're saying Tennessee, who's 5th right now, let's say USC should jump Tennessee. Is that what you're saying? So like after the Ohio State Michigan game, and they drop back instead of putting Tennessee in, put USC in if they win their conference.
Yeah, Tennessee got a huge bump by beating Alabama, who's shown to be, although a great team,
Weak.
not this amazing
Right.
world beater Alabama that we're all used to.
Right.
That's still a great win. That's still better than any win USC is going to have.
No, correct. I'm not saying that, but they didn't win their conference.
Sure.
Having one great win, and the thing is you don't penalize a team because they didn't have a chance. Well, USC hasn't played a team as good as that Alabama team. You know, maybe if they play.
Well, that's not Tennessee's fault.
No, nor is it USC's fault. How about Tennessee wins its conference and then there's no bitching about it?
Yeah, but my
How about
point
we
is
just go to the 12 team and not worry about it?
Tennessee will have actually beaten Alabama and LSU.
Okay, and we'll see how the end of the season, how all these teams look. Again, we've said a lot of teams are really good throughout the year, and then they have droppable losses. I mean, USC might lose to UCLA and Notre Dame. This is not a moot point. I'm saying we don't know what Tennessee's going to lose or what LSU's going to lose going through the rest of the season as well.
I know that Alabama and LSU are 2 of the 10 best teams in the country. I know that.
Okay, but you don't know USC's one of the top 10.
No, I think they're in that range.
So this is what we're doing. We're doing the eyeball test, and we're putting teams in that lost to teams that they're playing in the playoffs and excluding teams that haven't had a chance to even play those teams. My point is when you're talking about is fairness. Fairness is giving a team not going, well, you know, the SEC is the best, therefore the SEC is the best, and therefore the SEC should be in.
I'm just arguing the other point that the SEC is a better league than the Pac-12, and therefore you're penalizing a team for playing in the SEC and playing better teams.
Yeah. Well, I would
think,
say that
I
that's
think
true.
that a lot of things. I'm like you, Tim. I think a lot of people don't look at they overlook other conferences when you're talking about the SEC or the Big Ten, the Pac-12, Big 12, and even the ACC to an extent gets overlooked. You know, and it's like TCU this year; they're undefeated. If Oklahoma or Texas had the same schedule and beat the same teams as TCU has by the exact same scores, Oklahoma and Texas would be number 1 or 2 in the country. Where TCU's had to fight their way into number 4 and still aren't getting any respect.
You think Oklahoma or Texas would be ranked higher than Ohio State, Michigan, or Georgia?
If they were undefeated, I think so.
No. Over Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia right now, those 3 undefeated teams?
Maybe not Georgia. No, not Georgia. Not Georgia, no. But you know, I think maybe they would leave a Michigan or Ohio State out. I think they would probably leave a Michigan out and put them at 5 and have Oklahoma or Texas, whichever one was undefeated right now, in there. And TCU's had to struggle to get to number 4. And now they just beat Texas. And I hear by your voice, Mark, they're still not getting any respect, and they're still not a good team.
Well, you were just saying that people overlook, or the committee, I don't know what people you're talking about. I guess it's the committee, overlook or place weight on the Big 10 over the Big 12. But then you're telling me that Oklahoma and Texas would be ranked ahead of Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, but you got to remember, it's Oklahoma and Texas. That it's not TCU, and it's not Oklahoma State. It's not West Virginia. It's Oklahoma and Texas.
But it's also Ohio State and Michigan, and it's not Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Right.
So basically, you're saying that the Big 10 gets trumped over the Big 12, but basically you're saying Ohio State and Michigan, not the Big 10, and not trumped over the Big 12 in total, just everybody not named Oklahoma and Texas.
Right. Everybody not named Oklahoma and Texas is not getting respect in anything out of the Big 12. And the same way in the ACC, if you're not named Clemson, you don't get any respect.
But we never see any of those teams do anything to show whether they would get that respect or not. We don't know that.
TCU's doing it this year, and they're still not getting the respect. TCU's doing it.
Well, you just said the ACC. Sure, they're getting respect. They're number 4 in the college football playoff rankings,
and they will get in, Joey. If they stay undefeated, they're in.
They just went out. They're in.
Every one-loss team. So what respect are they not getting?
Well, like for you saying that they are a terrible team and they're going to lose another game this year. They'll lose a game. Well, you said earlier you was talking to I I don't remember
I
what you
said that
told
they
me
were a
to call, not
terrible
all to call
team.
them. You said, well,
What?
you didn't say we're a terrible team. You said they've still got to play Baylor, and they're
Yes.
probably going to lose. You said the other
No,
night they will
never said-
probably lose to Texas. You said they could probably lose to Texas, and you said they're just not. Here's a team that went on the road to West Virginia and barely beat West Virginia. Did you say that? And West
Well,
Virginia is
that's
the
the
worst team in
truth.
the conference.
That's the truth.
Right, it's the truth. But if that had been Oklahoma that went to West Virginia and they were undefeated and they barely beat West Virginia, you would be saying Oklahoma is a
You
top
don't know
4
what
team.
I
You
would
wouldn't
be saying.
saying,
How are you
I
telling
think
me,
I
Joey,
know.
what I would be saying? You don't have a clue what I would be saying. Okay. So
right.
the point I was trying to make about TCU is that I think that they're probably on the low end of the top 10 teams in the country. There are teams that have lost a game or in some cases, maybe 2 games that are better than TCU. However, that shouldn't matter. They're winning their games. If they win all their games, and even if they lose once and win the Big 12 championship, I think that they should receive heavy consideration for the playoff. If they are undefeated, as I stated, Joey, if you heard this, I said, if I was on the committee, I would say, I'm not wasting my time talking about TCU. They're in. They're just in. We don't even need to talk about them. They're just in. They won every game. They're a Power 5 champion. I was just simply making the point that if you look at how they've played against the rest of the Big 12, they have scraped by week after week after week. There's nobody that they've dominated in the Big 12. And that's not just a knock on TCU. That's a credit to the Big 12. It's a very balanced league. And so all I was saying is that I was asked, do they have any more challenges? And I said, well, based on the way they've played, yes, every week is a challenge for this team. So they could lose to Baylor. They could lose to Iowa State. I think that that's highly improbable. And then they have to, unlike any other conference in America, they've got to go and play and beat a team that they've already beaten, which is a difficult thing to do. So I think if you take all that into consideration, you realize that I'm actually crediting them with what they're accomplishing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I don't know.
It's
I
just
just,
like
I
the
just
last game of the year. Last game of the year, LSU could lose to Texas A&M, and then how
Sure.
good's that? So,
Texas,
They're
if
still
Texas
gonna
A&M is so bad, nobody's losing them, Joey. So just stop.
well,
That's
I
a
agree.
bad
I
team.
agree. I agree. But
Well, wouldn't
But it
it be
could happen.
funny if LSU lost to Texas A&M and then went and won the SEC championship game with 3 losses?
yeah,
That would be horrifying. I'm so tired of these rematch, these mulligans that the SEC gets. It's okay when you have a shitty Pac-12 and a bad Big 12. That's one thing, right? But in a year like this year, to tell a Power 5 conference if it's UCLA or USC with 1 loss, that even though you want a very, very good conference, you know what? You're not as good as the second best team in this conference. We don't know that. We don't know who would win. Well, we know for a fact that Georgia already beat Tennessee, but we're going to give them a mulligan and play again like we do every year for the SEC. We're going to give them 2 shots to win a championship, and we're going to exclude a conference, a Power 5 conference. To me, that's a broken system, period. There's no way people can argue that because no one knows how 12-1 UCLA would do in there. We don't know.
I generally agree with you, but understand that before today's result of Oregon losing to Washington, you would have Oregon in your Pac-12 discussion as being one of those teams. And a Tennessee could always say, we know what Oregon did against Georgia, and we know what we did against Georgia, and we both only lost 1 game. And we beat better teams than Oregon. So we're
using transitive property to see which teams are better. We know that transitive property doesn't work, Mark. That's
absolutely. If we don't have the transitive property, then how do we compare teams that don't?
You don't. You put conference champions in. That's how you do it.
My point is, Tim, can't you understand Tennessee's argument? Are you telling me that you can't even understand the argument?
That the argument is that they feel that they are one of the 4 best teams and therefore they should be in.
Well, if in this scenario that was part of the equation as of 3 hours ago, that if they said, if we get compared to Oregon, who wins the Pac-12 with one loss, we have one common denominator, and that's Georgia. And we both lost, and we both lost decidedly, but they got crushed, and we at least
okay.
hung in the
I'm
game.
sorry.
Hang on.
Yeah, no, I got you now.
And we
I
also
thought I
have
was
better
confused.
wins than Oregon.
Yeah, I was confused. But Oregon's not going to be the champ. Yeah, okay, but the Oregon's not the champ.
There's a difference between thinking somebody else's opinion or their basis of argument is ridiculous versus not agreeing with it, but at least understanding it. So I understand yours. I'm just taking Tennessee's side, and I'm saying, don't you at least admit or understand what their argument is?
Are you talking about if Oregon had won out and been a one-loss Pac-12 team with it? Yeah, but that's irrelevant now, right?
Okay, all right.
So I'm looking at my argument of a one-loss
USC or UCLA.
Yeah, a one-loss USC UCLA. Yeah, Oregon always on weak ground anyway because they got blown out. Right, that loss is just almost too much to overcome. So realistically, that would be the worst case scenario for the Pac-12 was a one-loss Oregon team because it was proven that they already lost to a team that's going to be in the tournament. That goes against everything I'm saying. I don't want to see rematches. Why are people so in love with these rematches? Dude, you lost on the field. You lost. You're out. That's the way it should be.
You also want champions, and a champion could have lost a game that would create a rematch. It's possible. Like Oregon.
Correct. But it was well, but that's not winning your conference. I think conference championships should matter, period. Because here's the thing, it's hard to win a conference. I don't care what conference you're in. It's difficult to win a conference.
Absolutely.
Being one of the best teams is great and all, but did you win your conference?
Okay, well, let me bring up this point that obviously we only have 4 spots and we've got 5 conferences.
Correct.
So let's say every conference champion is 1 loss. Then how do you determine who gets in?
Yeah, then
based on the resume, right?
Then it's a beauty contest. Absolutely.
Well, then if you're going to base it on the resume there, why wouldn't you base it on the resume just concerning all 1-loss teams?
Because it's not that situation, Mark. You're skipping over. What you're doing is you're making winning your conference irrelevant. I'm saying winning your conference does mean something. Therefore, if you have an equal record to a team that won its conference, you're out. You had your opportunity.
I'm just arguing Tennessee's point that they've played a better schedule than anybody they're going to be compared to. And they've beaten better teams. So I understand their argument. I'm not saying I agree with it. I want conference champions in the field first and foremost. And that's all we've got, conference champions.
But we don't know how good these teams are. For instance, look at the non-conference. Yes, look at the non-conference loss. Well, we know that LSU lost to an ACC team that's not very good.
They're not very good. They're turning out to be pretty damn good. They beat Syracuse by 5 touchdowns tonight.
So Syracuse is good?
They're okay. They're not losing. I guess I'm trying to... Syracuse isn't losing to anybody else by 5 touchdowns, are they?
I don't think that the SEC is untouchable like they've been in past years. I just don't. If this conversation was last year and you had, let's say, Oregon going undefeated with the crappy Pac-12 teams that were there last year, that's a whole different conversation. I fully get that Pac-12 champion.
You also understand, Tim, the knock that you just put on Syracuse, I could put on a zillion other teams that we've just brought up. Like UCLA, I could say, well, who have they beaten? Well, they beat Utah. Well, what did they do? They went to Florida and they lost.
Or Michigan beaten.
They went to Oregon and they lost by 2 touchdowns. Well, Oregon's already lost 2 games and they got blown out by Georgia by 46.
Who is OSU beaten out of conference? Who is Oregon beat? Who has Utah beat? Who has USC beat? Who have the Big Ten beat? The Big Ten is pretty trash, Mark. It's bad. It's a bad conference.
We can bring up the Big Ten. That's fine, but that's not part of the current argument. I was defending Tennessee's argument for a spot. That's all I'm doing.
I'm arguing that people can only play who's on their conference, right? Their conferences. And if you have a strong conference and you have a good, The reason why we're giving all these teams in the SEC a break is because the SEC is the best conference. And Uncle Rico, I don't stop being like a child, dude. I don't hate the SEC. I will right now, and I constantly have said the SEC is the best conference. We're done. Okay. But they're not heads and shoulders above the Pac-12, head and shoulders above the Big Ten. It's not like that. The SEC overall isn't that. I remember earlier this year, people were talking how great Kentucky's going to be on this show, how great Kentucky is. Look at Kentucky now. I mean, this idea that we just get in our heads that some certain programs and certain teams are so great and they can't lose, and therefore we just got to give them 2 people into the playoff because they're such great teams. Forget winning your conference. It doesn't matter if you win a Power 5 conference. We're going to bring you in. You know why? Because you are an SEC team, and there has to be at least 2 teams in the playoffs for the SEC. I think it's absurd.
Well, let's also understand, Tim, that if you start using game results from in-conference to disparage a team or discredit a team, somebody has to lose in that conference.
Yes.
Somebody's got to lose the games in every conference.
Correct.
When they play each other. So Kentucky's losing to other SEC teams.
And the Pac-12 had 5 teams in the top 25? And
yeah, I really don't care about the top 25. That doesn't.
Okay, then they had 4 teams in what, top 13?
Well, no, I'm just saying I don't. The rankings are inconsequential.
I've got to run. But before I go, somebody in the chat said Joey's got that drinking knowledge tonight. He must be drunk, drinking that beer. Joey's drinking a beer for Jeff Webster. Joey don't drink beer. It's my first one. I promise you it'll be my last one. So, all right, I'm gonna get off here, but
yeah,
y'all have a good night.
Thanks,
Joey. Arguments on these great wins, it just gets a bit tiring. It just like it. Well, who is this team beaten? You don't know who's going to beat whom until they play the games. And excluding whole conferences because we want to say that this team is this great because they beat this great team in this conference, it's so insular that it has to come. All these wins in the SEC are great wins. I mean, Tony and I were just joking about every win in the SEC is a great win, and it just gets kind of weird. And then when I keep hearing in the chat, and you've said a couple of times, who have these Pac-12 teams won? Who have these Big Ten teams won? We can pivot to that.
This is the point, Tim. Okay. There's 2 ways to look at this. One is if you just take trends, meaning trends in recent years.
That's irrelevant.
Hang on just a second. If it happens year after year after year after year after year after year, then even though I believe that this season should be based solely on what happened this season, we both know as reasonable people that when you have the best recruiting rankings and produce the most NFL players and the results on the field also back that up year after year after year after year, you're probably still the best conference. Now, to my next point, we don't have enough non-conference games, in my opinion, to accurately evaluate these conferences. They don't play each other enough. Like the Big Ten, like Michigan State looked bad when they played a Pac-12 team, Washington, who's a pretty damn good football team now, we're seeing right now. And Michigan State, they're losing in the Big Ten too. There's just not that many non-conference games for us to really evaluate these. It's not like UCLA's going out and playing 2 teams from all the other 4 conferences and they're playing 8 games and we can say, oh, wow, they got this resume and they went 7-1. They're great. We got like singular games. And if you look at the Big Ten in particular, Michigan didn't play anybody out of conference. Maryland didn't play anybody out of conference. Half these teams didn't play. Minnesota didn't play anybody out of conference for us to have any gauge. So we have very few examples of non-conference games. So the ones that we have, I don't use that as some overarching theme that those mean everything, but those are the only indicators we have. And the SEC played somewhat better, not decidedly or in a substantial way better than the other conferences. But if you add up their wins and losses outside the conference, they do have a better resume than the other conferences. But again, it's not like they went 12-0 against the other 4 conferences and blew everybody away. No, they had really good wins. They lost some games. But if you add it all up in total, their 2022 performance, non-conference, is better than the other conferences.
Agreed.
But again, it's not crazy good. It's
Right.
like 7-4 good, and they beat some good teams.
Is it good enough to get half the playoff teams?
Well, we only have 4 spots.
Okay, but I know. So therefore, was their lead? Were they so impressive this year, the SEC? And again, I'm not talking historically SEC. Clearly, they have been
this year.
the cream of the crop. But I'm talking about this year with a down Alabama, and I'm truly saying that in air quotes. The rest of
Who
Texas
yes,
A&M,
but let's stay
Missouri.
consistent, Tim. That down Alabama lost to teams in its own conference.
Well, so did USC.
When they went out of conference.
So did you?
They beat Texas. Well, USC hasn't played anybody outside the conference that matters yet. They will in a couple weeks. What, next week? 2 weeks.
Yeah. Not really much. I love you, Will, but you know, Notre Dame's not. If USC beats Notre Dame, it'll be a good win, but it's not a great win by any stretch of means. So.
And you probably, I think you'll understand and maybe agree with this. Unfortunately, when somebody like a USC goes out and beats a Notre Dame, by tagging another loss on Notre Dame, they're actually then creating a situation where people are discrediting Notre Dame in that win because they're giving them another loss.
Yeah, I agree that the losses within, the quote air quotes were teams lost in the SEC. But if you look at USC, it has one loss to a conference. Like I think Tony said earlier, there were 4 teams that hadn't lost to the bottom 8 teams in the conference until today. And those 4 teams are as good as anyone, probably not named Georgia, maybe top 2 or 3 teams in the country. They're just as good as any of those. So USC beating,
but Tim, you're I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're doing something you were blaming me doing.
I'm using your logic, Mark. That's what I'm doing. I'm using your logic to
argue
my point.
How do we know that those teams? How do we know that those 4 or 5 teams are?
We're going in circles. Well, exactly. That's my point. So therefore, the conference champion gets in. You're proving my point. We can't prove it. Therefore, let's make the conference champion mean something.
Who is the Pac-12 defeated outside the conference? That's notable.
That's notable. I can't off the top of my head.
I will, because I
notable wins
all the time. They beat Wisconsin. They beat Michigan State.
But those aren't good wins.
Exactly. They've beaten BYU. There's another.
Okay.
Oregon State. Let me think. Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford beat Notre Dame. Cal, USC, UCLA, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. So there you go. Wisconsin, Michigan State, BYU, Notre Dame.
Yeah. Who are the Big Ten wins? Let's do the Big Ten now.
No, let's do that. We're talking about the SEC. I'm not.
No. We're talking about because are you saying a 1 loss? So you're saying that a 1-loss Michigan or Ohio State should not be considered?
This conversation started with Tennessee, right? And the SEC. That's all we haven't talked much about the Big Ten. It's been about the SEC and Tennessee.
Now, my thing has been about any conference getting 2 teams in. My argument is not about Tennessee in particular. My conversation is about a conference getting 2 teams in, having a runner-up go in over a conference champion. That's my argument. Not particularly about the SEC, not particularly about Tennessee. My argument is why do we put 2 teams from one conference in with an identical record to a conference champion into the playoffs? That's my point.
And I've said probably 5 times, I agree with you. I want conference champions to be in the field.
Okay.
The only thing I said is I can understand Tennessee's argument. because they do play in the best conference, and they lost to the best team in the country as it stands right now. And they've beaten two of the best teams in the country. They will have two better wins than teams that will be in the playoff.
Why don't we just give Georgia the national championship then? Why don't we just go back to the polls and just say, hey, Georgia's the best team. They're better than Ohio State, right?
No, they're not.
Well,
I don't know.
hold on.
I want to
How
see
do we
Ohio
know,
State
right?
play Georgia.
This is what I'm saying. We're making this game where we're going back to the poll era where we're telling before the games are played to set up our playoff, we're doing a poll and we're removing people out of it based on who we think are the best teams. What we could do instead of that is make a criteria. If you have an equal record, did you win your conference? No, you're out. Because I think we also discussed that although SEC is a great conference, they aren't head and shoulders above the Big Ten and the Pac-12 this year. They just aren't. I've seen these teams play. They are not.
I don't know.
I would put the Pac-12's top 4 teams up against pretty much anyone except Georgia.
I will take Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and Tennessee over 4 teams from the Pac-12. Absolutely. Myself.
LSU and Tennessee are just better than any team in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is based on
everything I know about their rosters, their results on the field this year, everything.
What did Tennessee beat LSU by how much?
27.
27 points.
19 less than what Georgia beat Oregon.
Georgia didn't play LSU or Tennessee. Oregon didn't play LSU or Tennessee. It has nothing to do with it, really.
Well, we thought Oregon might be the best team in the conference, and they still might be the best team in the conference.
Well, we thought that Utah was the best team in the conference at the beginning of the year, and we wrote the Pac-12 off when they lost to Florida. So LSU loses by 23 to Tennessee, but they're better than any team in the Pac-12, really?
When you say we wrote off the Pac-12, I don't even understand what that means. I
Maybe
did
not
not
you
write off the
specifically.
Pac-12, and what has the Pac-12 done other than win games against itself to confirm that it's a good conference?
We could use that same thing for almost any conference.
Wisconsin, Michigan State, BYU, and Notre Dame.
So we did the Pac-12's wins. Give me the Big Ten's best wins this year, Mark.
Well, we're talking about the SEC.
I know. Well, let's talk about the Big Ten's wins.
SEC has defeated Oregon, Utah, Cincinnati, Texas, and Miami. Those would be the best wins.
And we've all agreed that they're the best conference. Let's talk about the Big Ten's best wins outside of conference. So we've lambasted the Pac-12 and we've written them off since they don't have big wins.
I didn't lambaste them or write them off. I said that their champion should be in the fucking playoff. I don't understand what you're not getting. I'm not telling you that there should be an argument, or I can understand the argument of a team that plays in a much better league saying we play in a better league and we only lost 1 game to the best team in the country. That's what I'm saying.
You don't want to do the Big Ten best wins, do you, Mark?
I got them right here.
Okay.
I produced a video that said the Big Ten's bad. So you're not, it's not like I just want you to say it because you day after day that I cut it straight, regardless of whether I've got to knock the Pac-12 or knock the Big Ten. I produced a video that says the Big Ten sucks. So the Big Ten is not a good conference this year.
You're arguing the fact that the Pac-12 champions shouldn't get in because they haven't won anyone of any substance outside of
anything I've said.
You're saying you agree, but you're arguing the point
that the Pac-12 champion should be in the playoff.
Correct.
I've said this over and over and over.
When you said you're going to take the side, you were going to argue for Tennessee.
Yes.
And your argument,
easy argument to make.
And your argument for Tennessee is the fact that the Pac-12 hasn't beaten anybody out of conference, right? So I was saying that could be applied to any other conference, and I said,
not really.
No.
Don't you think wins over Oregon, Utah, Cincinnati, and Texas are good wins?
We've already agreed that they're the best But would you think that those wins over those
and that's
teams?
the school that I'm arguing for that has a point would be Tennessee. That's the only one I've brought up.
Right.
I
What
didn't
is
say that
Tennessee?
Michigan deserves as a non-conference
What
champion
is-
to have an argument.
What is Tennessee's biggest out of conference win? Forget their whole conference. What is Tennessee's biggest win out of conference?
Well, you know that these teams only play one decent opponent outside the conference, and Tennessee beat Pitt.
Pitt.
Well, that's a better win than USC, Oregon, UCLA have out of conference, and Utah,
Marginally at best.
right?
What is
Right.
LSU's best win out of conference?
They don't really have one, just like USC, Oregon, UCLA,
Correct.
and Utah.
Okay. So we're not going to ride on the coattails of our conference mates. We're talking about our resume.
If we beat those teams in the conference that beat good teams outside the conference, like Texas, Oregon, and Utah,
then we're getting
LSU and
really
Tennessee, LSU and Tennessee
intransitive.
both beat Florida, who was good enough to beat Utah.
So my
Right.
point is that they may be marginally through transitive property better teams, and therefore that trumps a
Okay,
conference champion.
People sometimes take off on this transitive property, and I understand their point, but it's called a resume when it's all put together.
Yeah, I don't think it's strong enough. That argument by Tennessee that you took on isn't
No,
remotely
it's
strong enough.
it's
Isn't
awfully
remotely
strong.
strong enough to trump a conference champion.
It's mighty strong.
But it's not your point of view.
No, because I think we have conferences for a reason.
Correct.
We have conferences for a reason.
And winning that
That
conference.
doesn't mean the four best teams in the country are going to play in the playoffs.
We don't know
I'm
who
okay
the
with
four
that.
best teams are, Mark. We're trying to guess off of transitive property which ones are the best. That's what we're doing. We don't know if LSU or Tennessee could beat Oregon on a neutral field. We
Well,
don't
of
know
course we
that.
don't know it. No,
Right. So therefore, the best thing we could do is
I don't
is
know
go
that
off of-
UConn could beat Ohio State on a neutral field.
do
I
we
don't
know? Do we know that those teams did? So whoever doesn't win their conference, we know they didn't win the conference. That's simple enough, right? But yet we know also that the person with the same record won their conference. I don't care about this team beat X, Y, and Z, and therefore they are better than this team. You're trying to connect all these dots. I'm just simply saying
I'm
you
not
got two
connecting
teams with the
dots,
same.
I'm building a resume.
Well, you know what my resume is? I won my conference. That's
Yes,
my resume.
I agree with you.
Well, then what are we arguing
I've
about?
been arguing that for 10 years. I got a channel that's got probably 150 videos.
Okay, but then again, I'm asking you, what are we arguing about then?
We are
Some
arguing that I
crazy
said,
Tennessee fan that thinks they
Okay.
deserve to get in when they haven't won their
have
conference.
you ever had a discussion with somebody that you didn't agree with? I know that you've had discussions with people that you thought they were absurd, they were ridiculous, and their point had no validation
Yeah,
whatsoever.
this Tennessee argument, yes.
But you've also had conversations with people that you thought, okay, I don't agree with your point. I don't think that that's the best point, but I understand you've got valid information. You make a good point. There's validity there, but I don't agree with you.
What you're saying about Tennessee and LSU
I'm
have
saying
valid.
Tennessee's got a better resume than anybody in the Pac-12. That's what I'm saying.
They have a better resume because we believe that these teams in the SEC are the best teams. Yes. If we want to, but here's the thing then, why even have a
Because
playoff?
they went out of conference this year and showed that. I'm not just making that up.
And you also said that the sample size is so small, it's almost irrelevant.
Absolutely. I
So
did
then
say
therefore,
that.
how
It's
much
not-
weight? So therefore, how much weight should we put to this crazy argument when you have, again, identical records? One team won their conference, one team that you agree with me. And so therefore, these Tennessee quacks are off their mind. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, let me put it like this. While I argue for conference champions to be in the playoff, only conference champions, because we only have 4 spots and we got 5 conferences. So that's a problem right there that we can't even get all the conferences in anyway. So the conference championship argument, in a sense, even though that's the one I argue for, is kind of a bad one because we can't let them all in anyway. So we got to leave one out anyway. So that team, what are we telling that team that doesn't get in?
You win your conference, win your games in conference, win your conference, and go to the playoffs. That's why it's a playoff.
One of them won't.
One of them won't, and then you have to play his game. But here's my problem. Fine, Mark. If we have 5 conference champions,
we're basing this all on conference championships, but one of them won't make it.
Okay, right. But here's my point. Why are we arguing a team that didn't win? Oh, well, because we can't get all 5 in, therefore it should be a free-for-all?
Tim, I want the conference champions to be in the playoff.
Okay. No, I know. And we keep saying this. You don't have to repeat that again. I fully get you. We're talking about the people that think that 2 teams from the SEC should get in perennially when they don't win.
Well,
I get it.
don't know
When the other
perennial.
conferences suck. I totally get that. But when you have good conferences playing good ball and they have equal record, you say, well, look at the resume. We're building a resume. Here's a resume. I won my conference. I would love to hear that, well, but you know what? This team beat this team in preseason, and therefore this, that, and this. So therefore we have a better resume. No, you don't. You lost your conference.
Sure, but the same argument's going to be made by that 5th team that won its conference but got left out. They're going to say, why does our resume matter when nobody else's resume matters? They won
Therefore,
their conference. We won our conference as well and got left out.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. If everyone has an identical record, right? I'm assuming a 1-loss team. If you have 5 teams with 1 or no losses, which we are going to have this year, it's inevitable that there's going to be the Pac-12 is going to have 1 loss, most likely. The Big 12 most likely, and I think that obviously the Big 10 and the SEC most likely have an undefeated champion in my opinion. So you're going to have, and then therefore you're going to have an ACC team with 1 loss at all as well. So then it becomes to this beauty contest about this conference is the best. So therefore, you know what? ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12. You know what? You guys are out. We're gonna grab 2 from here. Since we can't fit everybody in, we're gonna actually remove 1 more person's chance who won. It's going backwards. You're saying, you say if it was great, if we could fit all 5 in. Okay, fine. We can't fit all 5 in. So does that mean we get rid of 2 now and put in 2 from 1 conference? That logic doesn't make sense to me.
Then you're talking to the wrong person. I've said 12 times that I would put all 4 champions in, but we got to leave 1 out. I don't know who that's going to be because we could have 4 champions or we could have 5 champions with 1 loss. So
I'm not arguing with you, Mark, because you made your point 12 times. I'm arguing with the argument you're taking on for Tennessee and saying it's a bad logical argument.
I'm saying that they do have an argument that they've got. I am not the type individual that says whatever is the best argument is in some arguments, in some topics, whether it be whatever, politics, religion, whatever it might be, I may have this stance on some things. But usually when it comes to sports, that there's not just this one argument is the only one that makes complete 100% sense and no other arguments mean anything and they're all 0% validity. I think that the argument that we have is the best argument, but there are other arguments out there that have validity. That's what I'm saying.
Validity.
That
I would say there's some arguments out there that have some valid points.
That have some credibility. Yes.
Credibility. Fine. I agree.
And so
I'm just saying
that's
that
what I'm taking on for the masses, for somebody out there, for
the
real
SEC.
MVP, for whomever.
For the SEC, you're taking on their mantle. I agreed that for years that the other conferences were crap, and that it was clearly that 2 teams but even then, watching rematches on teams that have already played each other, that's not good television. I'm sorry, it just isn't. Not for anyone that's outside the SEC. Let's put it that way. So, all right, Mark. We agree to disagree to agree again.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you getting on here, if nothing else, to honor J-Dub.
J-Dub, roll tide, big roll tide up to Jeff in the sky. And I'll talk to you later, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. See ya. All right. Brian is checking in for the night. What's going on, Brian? Hello, Brian.
Oh, I just wanted to debate, but he's gone now, so we good.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not.
Oh, sweet. No, bring him back. Bring him back.
All right.
Hey, man. I get you.
No, Mark, it's your show. I'll bring me in if you want.
All right, man. I get your
Jim?
point.
Come
No,
on.
no, no. I want to talk. I want to talk. Hey, man, I get your point about the champion thing, but you cannot tell me that there's a Pac-12 team that's as complete of a team as Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State.
I've seen Ohio State and Michigan struggle. I don't think that that any Pac-12 team is better than them, but I think they belong on the field with them. I think that a Pac-12 team could beat one of those teams. I don't think it's impossible for me to say that. Although they'd be probably maybe even a double-digit underdog. No one can tell me that on any given Saturday that someone from the Pac-12 couldn't beat. I've seen those teams struggle against some mediocre Big Ten teams.
Okay, I agree that any team can beat a team, and I get that. But I'm saying there's no way you can watch those three teams and then compare them to, let's say, UCLA, who's losing to a 3-6 Arizona U of A team right now. USC, who, yeah, they got a great offense, but their defense is terrible. Who else we got? Oregon, who just lost to Washington. I mean, who in the Pac-12 is as complete? Michigan, for example.
I don't know. I haven't seen Michigan play. I'll let you know after Michigan plays Ohio State. I'll let you really know how I feel about Michigan. I mean, who has Michigan really played this year? We looked at Penn State and we say, well, they beat Penn State. You know, it's a good Penn State team. But that Penn State
a very good team.
Do you think that Penn State team is better than any of those Pac-12 teams we're talking about? Do you think
I think they're right there.
You do.
They're right there. Yeah, I mean, they just beat Maryland 30-0. They just beat Maryland 30-0 today.
We're playing the same game we try to get away from. Everyone thought that UCLA was going to mop the floor with Arizona right now. Arizona for the last 3 weeks has been coming on strong. You got to realize that that teams get better as the year goes on as well.
Yeah, but bro, they're 3-6. I mean,
I'm not saying they're a great team.
No, they're not a good team at all. I mean,
that offense is probably better than the offense that Michigan has.
They're the fifth-ranked scoring offense.
Who's got a better offense than Michigan?
USC.
Michigan's the fifth-ranked scoring offense.
USC.
Oh, USC. Oh, yeah, USC. I'll give. Look, USC. Okay. I say complete team though. I already acknowledge USC has a great offense, but complete team. We're talking about all three phases here: offense, defense, and special teams.
Yeah.
There isn't a team I look at in the Pac-12 that's as complete as Georgia, Ohio State.
Agreed.
And that's my argument there, though. Is like you can't tell me watching the Pac-12 that there's a team that stacks up in terms of completeness as those three teams.
Wait, which three? Michigan is you throwing Michigan in there as well? I don't know about Michigan.
Where do you want to go by? Fifth-ranked scoring offense, fourth-ranked rushing offense, number one scoring defense, number one rush defense.
Anybody.
I mean,
you played one good team in Penn State.
Okay, and we destroyed them.
Okay.
We played a top. Team. We also played a top 10 defense in Iowa.
With a team that has absolutely no, and you guys didn't light it up on the scoreboard either. You beat them, right? But they're also a tragically horrible offensive team. Don't bring up anybody. The Big Ten West is horrible.
It is horrible, but do they have a great defense? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Iowa defense is awesome.
Horrible.
Yeah, Iowa's defense is awesome, and they scored 27 points on them. And Michigan doesn't run they're a time possession offense, so 27 points is a good day for Michigan. They're not about.
If you think I'm arguing that if Michigan beats Ohio State, they shouldn't absolutely be in the playoffs, you're
arguing that they beat but then you're arguing that they beat a top 3 team.
I'm saying to you that the winner of the Ohio State Michigan game is clearly a no-brainer in the playoffs. Are you arguing that if one of them loses, they should still go to the playoffs as well?
No, but what I'm arguing is you can't watch the results on the field and the resumes and look at all the numbers and every aspect of the game, special teams, defense, and offense, and tell me that there's a team in the Pac-12 that's as, again, complete as any of those teams. Because when I look at a team and I'm judging, hey, are they the 4 best teams? I'm looking at all 3 phases of the game. And I'm judging, are they great in all 3 phases?
Yeah.
There's not a Pac-12 team that's great in all 3 phases. There's just not.
Do you think Michigan's great in all 3 phases?
Where are they
great?
Bad? Are they not great? Yeah. Is a top 5 scoring offense great?
It depends on who you're playing.
What you mean?
If you go straight off of stat, let me say this: if you go straight off of stats, right, and you're playing teams that aren't this, you played Iowa, who has a good defense. You played Penn State, who has a good defense, right? But who else have you played with a good defense?
I mean, I would argue those are two better defenses than anyone in the
Okay,
Pac-12.
but what about the other 8 games you play? So when you tell me they're top 5, this and statistically this and that, okay, but who?
Well,
who
would you
play?
acknowledge that the Big Ten has better? Would you acknowledge those two defenses are better than any Pac-12 defense?
Iowa, yes.
Penn State, yes. There's really no debate there.
No debate? I don't know if there's no debate.
Well, how about this? Penn State, outside of the one game they played against Michigan, has held 6 teams to under 100 yards rushing, and then 2 other teams to just around 100 yards rushing. You know how much yards rushing they gave up to Michigan?
How many of those were horrible offenses in the Big Ten?
They played Ohio State, and they held them to 98
That's
yards
one
rushing.
good offense.
That's arguably the best offense in the country.
Okay,
They held
that's
them to
one. That's
98
1 out
yards
of 10. That's 1 out of 10. What about the other 9?
So they just stopped the best offense.
But they did it, Tim.
Well, you're telling me
I don't
statistically.
understand.
Statistically,
Tim, would you not say that USC has a tremendous offense?
USC has a very good offense.
Okay, what have they done it? They've done it against who?
That's my point.
Oh, I'm looking at players.
We'll see, but if you stated, well, they scored this much against this team,
on that
this
offense
much against that team, we could then say, well, that's only 1 out of 10. That's only 2 out of 10. No,
so the teams USC's played
in America has played enough quality opponents to say, well, they've played 7 great opponents. So
then our answer is we don't know.
I mean,
Right?
you never know.
Right?
But I've already said that you never know. It's any given
Right.
Saturday.
We don't
but
know.
you can also make an educated and logical decision based off the resumes and what you've seen. That's
But
all
aren't
I'm
these two
saying.
teams going to play each other, and then we'll know who wins their conference, and therefore we'll know which team goes on to the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that you can't tell me watching Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, just based off resume and how they played in all 3 phases of the game, that there's not a team that matches up like that in the Pac-12. Yeah, any given Saturday it might happen.
Without a doubt, I think that there's not a team that matches up with Georgia. Without a doubt, I don't think there's a team that matches up with Ohio State. And you know what? Most likely, I'll give you the most likely as far as I'm going to go, because I don't know. If I were told you, I think that there's no one in the Pac-12 that matches up against Michigan, I'll tell you I haven't seen enough to say that answer definitively. But
Why
the first
can't you say
two,
that about
from what
Ohio
I've seen
State?
on that team and how they played in the past, there's enough pieces at Ohio State that I know how they're going to play. There's enough pieces at Georgia I know how they're going to play. With
You
Michigan,
could apply that same argument to Ohio State, though. The same argument you're using against Michigan, you can apply to Ohio State.
I've seen CJ Stroud. I've seen him. I mean, no, there's a number of pieces. There's a number of players, right? Their line, the offensive, the defensive line. I forget their names. Tumalau and who's the other guy?
Do you think their D line is better than Michigan's?
Harrison, they've got a great defensive line.
So I know enough about that team to say there's no one that matches up with them in the Pac-12.
Whoa. Do you think their D line is better than Michigan's?
More talented.
I don't know definitively. Their
I'm gonna
defensive
tell
line.
you right now.
I think their defense is better. I think their defense as a whole is better.
You think that their defense is better than the
I think
number
their
one?
defensive coordinator is better.
Well, you think their defense is better than the number 1 rush defense, the number 1 total defense, and the number 1 scoring defense?
You keep bringing up stats like that, but the thing is
Ohio
that,
State hasn't played anyone better, though. That's my point. You can use that same argument for Ohio State.
Well, no, I'm saying that the stats. Now you're talking about. Here's my question to you as well. Are you talking when you say number 1? Are you talking about the overall yards? Are you talking about the yards per play?
Total
Points
defense,
per drive? What stat are we using?
Yards per game. Yards per game.
Oh, so yards per game
and scoring points per. They're number 1 in everything. They're number 1 in rush. They're number 1 in scoring.
I'm not sold on the offenses in the Big Ten. That's all I'll say to you. So I don't know.
Okay, I get that, but I'm just going to bring it back to you said Ohio State's defense. You're sold because of their
But what I'm saying
players,
is
and you think
when you keep telling me how great the defense is at Michigan, right? Do they play even this? If you're watching the Arizona, you're talking about you referenced UCLA, Arizona, right? This Arizona offense is really good.
Okay,
it's really good.
Okay.
How many offenses like this does Michigan face this year? USC, Washington. Well, let me finish. USC, Washington, Utah, UCLA. How many offenses are you guys facing like that this year? So when you say we're top 5, That's awesome. But what offenses have you played?
Well,
Like
all
you
those teams, though, Tim, are playing in a silo, of course, that you're saying have great offenses.
Again, we're using the same comparisons.
Wait,
Yeah.
hold on. I get what you're saying.
Wait, let me ask you a question. Eyeball tests, right? We love that. That's what we're doing. We're saying, well, everything's equal, playing this and that. Watching these offenses, I've watched a lot of Big Ten teams this year, probably more than ever, right? Because of the situation. I watched a lot of Big Ten. I'm not overly impressed with the offenses in the Big Ten.
Well, they have better defenses in the Big Ten than the Pac-12.
Yeah, it's kind of a.
How do we
it's
know
kind
that? Maybe they have worse offenses. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
That's
can I give you?
gets down this whole
I would
thing. We
say
don't
they're
know
better
who these
defense.
teams are.
Let me give you a perfect example of this. Right, 2016, Washington, great team. Right, the offense was explosive all year.
Great team.
And then in 2016, the playoff version, the playoff
they
team.
were okay.
USC.
Okay, I'll
They
give you.
had a
Okay,
great
fine, but they were scoring. They
They
were
were
a good
good.
offense.
They had Jake Browning at quarterback, so that holds them back a lot. But
Yeah.
go
Okay,
ahead.
but they were a good offense in the Pac-12. They were putting up numbers in the Pac-12. My point with this is they go up against 2016 Alabama in the first round and they just get shut out.
Okay.
So my point with that is, yes, we've seen data where Big 12 teams, these great offenses, go up into the playoff and they just get smoked.
We're not
Against
talking
great
about 20,
defense.
but we're not talking about 2016. We're talking about 20. We're talking about 6 years later.
No, I know. I get what you're saying. My point with
Different
that was we want
programs.
to. I know, but we want to criticize like Big Ten defenses, and I think the same thing applies with SEC defenses. But those are the things that translate in the playoff, and that's been shown year after year. Now, back to my point with you said Ohio State, like you want to give them the benefit of the doubt because you think their D line and their players and all that.
They
Michigan's
got a great
outperformed-
quarterback. That's criteria for me. Number one, they've got
Okay,
a
they
great
do.
quarterback. That's always criteria number one for me. Arguably
do,
probably
and-
the best quarterback.
They do, and I agree with that. But that's the only area they're better than Michigan right now is quarterback.
Receivers?
Well, the passing game in general is there.
I mean, they're probably gonna have their third. They're probably going to play their third string running back against you guys, and he's going to look like an All-American.
Well, their running game, if you look at every time they've gone against an average to, I would say, above average D line, so let's go ND, Iowa, and Penn State, they couldn't run the ball. Yeah, they could run the ball on like lower tier, mid tier run defenses, but they have not been able to run the ball on better front sevens every time they've done so. Michigan, on the other hand, they know you're going to run the ball. They've gone against Iowa and Penn State, who are very good run defenses. Penn State gets a lot of crap because they're 60-second rush defense right now, but that's solely because of Michigan. Every other team they've held to around 100 yards or under.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, I get you. Maybe they're better in the passing game, but that's literally it for me so far. I mean, if you look at all the numbers, the metrics, everything, that's the only spot they're better at Michigan.
Hey, I'm just giving you a hard time. I like numbers too. I'm not part. I'm just messing with you.
No,
kind
I
of, but at the
No, I
same
know,
time,
Phil.
the problem is that we don't play the same teams. Therefore, we don't know how these numbers match up. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I get what you're saying, man. I totally understand. It's any given Saturday. I just have a hard time. This goes back to the eye test, which I don't like it either. But it's hard to watch teams like I'm gonna even throw Tennessee. I know you were talking about Tennessee earlier. I would say I personally would just watching that team, their resume. If I had to go to Vegas and bet on them against a Pac-12 team, I bet on them to beat any Pac-12 team.
Okay. Just remember, before Eric Gentry got hurt in the Utah game, USC statistics, especially red zone defense, they were number 8 in the country red zone defense. Right? They were top 20 in defensively in points per drive. So I mean, they were a good defense. You put that together with a top 10 offense like we have. Guys, all bro thinks that USC is going to win the Pac-12. I think USC's got a great chance. You know why? Because all they have to do is beat UCLA next week.
Well, USC is the only chance to get in.
Then we're in a championship game. Well, no, it's not going to be a cakewalk because then we have to play either UCLA again or Utah or Oregon. These are real teams. These are, as we say now, they're top 10 teams.
USC's your only chance to get in the playoff now.
Why couldn't UCLA have a chance?
They just lost. They're going to lose. Well, No, there's a minute left. I take that back.
You got
It's
Dorian
30
Thompson-Robinson
take it
with
back.
1 minute. They haven't lost
Yeah.
yet.
No, I just checked right back. I thought they were
He could
gonna
easily go
lose.
70 yards on this defense. This is Arizona's defense. He could easily go 70 yards.
But you think they put UCLA in after this, even if they go and win the Pac-12?
How much did Georgia beat Missouri by?
Georgia?
Yeah.
3.
Right. So if we're gonna
Yeah,
say
but
if you have one close game against a clunker team, you're out. What kind of system are we doing there? Every team's
Well,
gonna have a bad
Does
game.
UCLA have 2 wins like Georgia has?
No, they don't. But again, we're not putting 4 Georgias in the playoffs. Georgia only fills 1 slot.
Well, Georgia's going to win the.
And let's give the second slot to the winner of Michigan, Ohio State. That's 2 slots. That leaves 2 slots left. Right?
Yeah, I just think if they had to come down to UCLA or like I guess a Tennessee. I'm not saying they pick 10. I'm not saying they
that again. So we've already gone down that road.
No, I understand, but I'm not saying they pick Tennessee, but I can see them struggling
I
with
think
that.
they do.
That's if Ohio State or Michigan wins the Big Ten.
Well, I think
yeah,
They're
that's
going to win
I
a
don't know a
conference
lot.
championship game.
I don't know a lot, but
Well, Iowa
that's
might
about
go to
sure
the
as I think of
championship
any
game
of
now.
the conferences that those 2 teams
Mark,
are going to win the conference.
Mark, how crazy is
Iowa's
that
got one of the
Iowa?
best defenses in the country.
Hey, Mark, how crazy is that Iowa might have a chance to go to the Big Ten championship game?
It is crazy because they got one of the worst offenses in history.
Yeah, but no, all I'm saying is, man, this game UCLA's having right now, and it does look like, they got past it, but this game, I could see the committee using this as justification, even if they win, to put like a Tennessee over. They've done it before with Georgia. They've done it before with Alabama. They've done it before with Ohio State. So I'm just saying, I wouldn't be shocked if they put a Tennessee over a UCLA Pac-12 champion just because of performances like this.
Oh, believe me, I've watched the BCS and I've watched the playoffs and I've watched rankings long enough to say, yeah, you're probably right. They can do whatever they want, and they will justify whatever they want.
And it comes down to this. They always say it's the 4 best teams, right? That's what they always say it is.
That's kind of their catchphrase when they run out of any other arguments or get backed into a corner. They say, "Well, we are just charged to select the 4 best teams." Yep.
But do you believe that's what it is? This playoff?
I think that the playoffs are set up for the networks or for ESPN. That's what I think. I think they want the 4 teams that'll be the most that will bring in the most viewers. Is what I think.
I think they've been clear about that.
Cincinnati did not bring in viewers last year. They had to select Cincinnati.
It was a weird year, though, Mark. I mean, they were undefeated. It was going to be kind of hard to leave them
out. Well, that's
out.
what I'm saying. They had to select Cincinnati, not because they brought in viewers. They would have selected Ohio State. They get more viewers or as many as anybody in the country.
Because I think it's been clear from the start since 2014 that they've always said it's the 4 best teams. I know we're about this conference stuff, and I agree. And I agree with that, and that's definitely something that should be considered. But if we're talking 4 best teams, doesn't that get into the territory of like, do you think Tennessee might be one of the 4 best teams? I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm just saying.
I think that, they absolutely could be. I mean, how would I know? It's just, it is what it is. And, as arguing, I'm going to tell you that I do think it's likely. I think it's more likely that a 1-loss Tennessee gets in over a champion 1-loss championship UCLA. Yeah, I think that's going to happen.
I do tell you this. I would like to see USC actually in the Pac-12 just because of their off. I think they got a good offense. I mean, I don't know how their defense would stack up against anybody, but
well, the defense is coming back. The USC's defense with Eric Gentry is, I'm not going to call it an elite defense, but it is a very good defense. What it is when you get inside the red zone and you've got a guy, an athlete who's a freshman All-American at ASU, transferred to USC, and Eric Gentry, who's 6'6" and a 7-foot wingspan, then not only just bats balls down, but even the ones he doesn't get in the way of, he makes quarterbacks alter their throws. And it wasn't just some fluke that USC was getting a ton of interceptions when he was out there, and then it kind of went away after he got hurt. The guy is a difference maker. And the thing that I got from Ryan on USCfootball.com, as you get into near the goal line and that field shrinks like it does, having that kind of force in the middle as well also shrinks those passing windows. So I don't know what USC would do against those teams. I would like the opportunity to see. I would like to see
exactly.
I agree. I agree with that.
To Tim's point, let me just cut in here for a second. To Tim's point, I truly believe that Tennessee is a better team than UCLA. However, if we're going to have a playoff and the Pac-12 gets shut out, then we'll just never know. We never saw if UCLA is the champion, which they just lost this game. Whoever it is, USC is the Pac-12 champion. Even if God came down and told us Tennessee's a better team and they should be in the playoff, well, we saw them play Georgia. They're in the SEC. They had an opportunity to win that conference. They didn't get it done versus, okay, here's another year where the Pac-12 doesn't get a seat at the table. And we can make all kind of conjectures about, UCLA or USC or whomever didn't play well against Fresno State or whomever, Oregon State and these various teams that are decent teams, but not great teams. But they didn't get the opportunity. They did not get the opportunity. The one thing I will say about the SEC is obviously in this invitational, as Larry is telling us, it is an invitational. It's really not a playoff. A playoff's an objective system that determines who makes the field. The NFL is a playoff. It's an objective system where nobody has to decide anything. The structure, the rules decide everything. This is an invitational. Hang on just a second. This is an invitational. And while the SEC has done the best in taking advantage of the opportunities, they've been given the most opportunities. During this 8 years of playoffs, the SEC has been given 10 spots, a spot every year, and twice 2 spots. So that's 10 opportunities. The Pac-12 has been given 2 opportunities. So what is more likely to happen, that you win championships being given 10 opportunities or being given 2 opportunities?
I 100% agree with that, and it's more of a problem with the system. So that's why when it does go to a 12-team playoff, we're not going to have these discussions anymore. Hopefully
we will.
I was just about to say, hopefully they don't just put like a bunch of SEC teams. But I think one of the rules is, don't they mandatory have to put the conference champions in the new ones? Yeah. So I mean, we're not going to have that issue anymore.
We will, because
it's more of a
if you watch Rick's when we've been playing around with the playoff with our what's the college football brackets, you'll see that number 5 team is in a really nice spot. That number 5 team gets to play the worst of the 4th best team, right? But it's sometimes, again, like we're talking about Tennessee right now, or maybe a Michigan, they slide in that 5th spot. It would be an argument this year on which one gets that 5th spot between the loser of the Ohio State Michigan and the loser of the whoever the SEC champ's going to be. That's going to be the issue. Is who gets that number 5 spot?
But the opportunity at least is going to be there. There will always
be arguments, but that's what makes college football great. You know?
I know, but at least the opportunity will be there at that point.
Right.
Yeah, there might be a complaint with the seeding, but the opportunity will be there now. It's not because now you don't have an opportunity at all. With the 12 team, you're going to have an opportunity. And then UCLA just lost. So USC is the only hope now.
Yeah.
The unfortunate aspect of that is that while that has hurt the Pac-12's chances, the only thing that's proven is that there's different distribution within the Pac-12. So once all these conferences just play conference games, that never really proves how good or bad each conference is, because every conference obviously goes 500. All it proves is what is the distribution of power within the conference. Is it a top-heavy conference? Is it a Clemson and everybody else? Is it muddled where everybody beats everyone else and it's not perceived to be very good because it's got like 6 or 7 really decent teams that beat each other? It's just all that proves once the conferences start to play each other is the distribution of power within the conference, but it doesn't prove how good the conference is versus the other conferences.
Yeah, and you usually see that separation. And I'm not trying to compare conferences, but I mean, I guess it's gonna kind of sound like that, but the years when the SEC and I guess the the Big Ten this year, the Big Ten is bad this year. I agree, but when you have a couple elite teams,
Yeah.
you see that clear separation with those teams
Yeah.
versus like
I'm not convinced that the Big Ten's bad. It played bad in about 3 to 4 non-conference games.
yeah.
I don't even know if it played bad in that many non-conference games. The teams that were supposed to be good, like Michigan State and Wisconsin, went and lost non-conference games and made the conference look bad. Then they came back to the conference and just lost a bunch of games there too.
That's true. I guess I put it like this. I think there's the tier 1 Ohio State, Michigan. I got tier 2 is just Penn State, and then
Yeah, I would agree.
And then it's really just everybody else.
Yeah, like 4 through 10 are pretty much the same team.
Yeah, I mean Illinois lost today to Purdue. I mean that Big Ten West is just a mess.
Yeah.
Might be the messiest division in football, to be honest.
Yeah, if you're looking for elite teams, they're not there. That's for sure.
Oh yeah,
But I don't know that it's as bad as everybody thinks it is. But it's not good.
And then the SEC, it's probably Georgia by itself, and then Tennessee, Bama, and then LSU, and after that, it's probably everybody else. So within the SEC, there's a couple more tier differentials versus like the Big Ten, and then I think the Pac-12 is just like a bunch of decent teams just fighting each other.
Well, it's even difficult to make tiers out of these because, you just rated LSU below Bama. They beat Bama. Ole Miss just played Bama to the wire. That's even difficult to do.
Well, yeah, the Tennessee Bama tier is like right there with that. Well, I guess you could put LSU, Bama, and Tennessee in the same tier. Because because Tennessee beat the shit out of LSU. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And Ralph, you say the bottom of the Big Ten is horrible. The bottom of every conference is horrible. That's why they're the bottom of the conference. And those teams, there's always going to be your Vanderbilts and Kentuckys. There's always going to be your
Kentucky,
your Colorado. Well, they just lost to Vanderbilt. I'm trying to get a dig. Let me get.
They're 6-4 though. They're not.
Let me have my fun tonight with the real. All right, he has his fun. I'm having my fun right now. And then you have your Colorados and your Stanfords, and so every conference has their crap teams on the bottom.
The ACC's got a pretty thick bottom of crap. They've got.
I think the ACC is probably the worst.
Tech, Miami, Georgia Tech, Boston College.
Didn't UConn beat Boston College?
Yes.
And then it wasn't UConn part of that terrible non-conference for Michigan? And
Boston College beat NC State today.
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean,
so
Notre Dame is turning out to be the Grim Reaper of the playoff right now because now they beat Clemson, and now don't they got a USC coming up?
Didn't they almost lose to Navy this week?
Yeah.
So
what
here's
I'm
the
saying
thing:
though is they could be the Grim Reaper because if they beat USC, they already knocked Clemson out. So if they beat USC, they're going to knock the Pac-12 out.
That Clemson game, we've talked about it a bunch of times. Starting off the blocked punt for a touchdown, then an interception for a touchdown, going down 14, and that Clemson offense is not built to come back from behind. I think that just started. I think that's just that Notre Dame. I mean, they played good job for Notre Dame for taking care of those opportunities, but I don't know if that game's played again if it's the same outcome.
I mean, they control the line of scrimmage pretty well.
That is a good point. Well, and the thing is their offense is terrible.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is like they could end up being the Grim Reaper of the playoff because they've already knocked Clemson out. They have to play USC. If they happen to beat USC, they would have knocked 2 conferences out of the playoff.
Yeah, that is a possibility. Yep.
Just putting that out there.
They also lost to Marshall and almost lost to Navy. So
I agree.
They should have lost to Cal.
That is a classic case of a bipolar team. A team that they can play up, but they also play really down. They played OSU. They played Ohio State tough. The next week they lost to Marshall. They beat North Carolina, who's 8-1. It's their only loss, and they beat them by 2 scores. And they beat Clemson. So they've beaten good. That's the thing. They've beaten really good teams, and they've lost to really bad teams.
Well, if their administration would make the decision to join the ACC, they would probably be the ACC champions.
Yeah, they would.
They'd be
But right now,
Clemson and Syracuse.
No,
Yeah, right
as Tony pointed out, Stanford is the ACC champion.
Yes.
yeah, but right
No,
now,
I'm going Notre Dame. Sorry.
yeah, no. Right now, they're just the Grim Reaper. So if they keep doing what they're doing, they can keep knocking. Hopefully, I hate Notre Dame as a Michigan fan, so I'm rooting for USC. But I'm just saying they could end up being that Grim Reaper.
With USC, Notre Dame, anything can happen. I think USC is the better team. They might probably I think SC might even be favored by 10 points, but I think that it's going to be a good game.
No doubt. All right, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, Mark.
Appreciate you being here.
Be late.
We got Michael coming on board. Michael, how you doing? You got to be a happy guy.
Yeah, I got a couple questions for you. All right, Team A, they have Michigan, Northwestern left. Team B has Minnesota, Nebraska left. Team C has Northwestern, Indiana.
Okay, I know who all these teams are, but go ahead.
Who most likely wins the West?
Good Lord. Okay, Illinois plays Michigan and Northwestern. Iowa plays who? Minnesota and Nebraska, and Purdue plays.
Purdue has Northwestern and IU.
Well, Purdue's got the light touch there with Northwestern and Indiana. You should win the last two games. You should.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the Big Ten West, so.
Yep, it's the wild, crazy West.
Yeah.
Boiler up. Yeah, I'm going boiler up, Michael.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
I do got to ask you this though: who do you think Iowa's most likely to lose to, Nebraska or Minnesota?
Minnesota. They got to play Minnesota on the road. They're playing Nebraska at home, and Minnesota is just better than Nebraska anyway.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, where's it been for the last few?
Have you seen Nebraska the last 3 weeks without their quarterback?
Yeah, they gave up they've scored like what Iowa's doing through the middle portion of the season.
3 today, 9 against Illinois, and last week was who they played last week and scored whatever they scored, 10 points. 13, 3, and 9. That's their last 3 without Casey Thompson.
But where's this coming from with Iowa this late in the season?
They're the same team. You know what?
No, I mean,
you know where it's coming from?
Turnovers?
No. Well, they've lost 3 games in the Big Ten. They got done playing Ohio State and Michigan. That's where it comes from. And now they're playing Minnesota and Purdue and Wisconsin and Northwestern. That's where it's coming from.
Yep. And one thing I was going to say also this too, I'm trying to think after Baylor, who's TCU in the season with?
Iowa State.
All right. So, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't Baylor get beat up like a redheaded stepchild last night against Kansas State?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So, do you think it's more likely that TCU can get it done, or are you still on the premise that they'll slip up and lose one before the Big 12 championship?
If somebody held a gun to my head, I say they still lose a game.
Well, they have at Baylor. They're at Baylor.
At Iowa State and a Big 12 championship game.
Mm-hmm. But if it was the next week, who would they play, though?
In the championship game?
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to be Kansas State.
Oh, that should be a good rematch of game, stuff like that. No, I was just wondering stuff like
especially since Kansas State was beating them by 18 points when they lost their 2 quarterbacks and they had to play with a third stringer at TCU.
Yep. Now, what do you think Carolina's chances are of winning the ACC if, and say like that, Notre Dame does beat USC and TCU loses, of North Carolina making the CFP? What would you put it as a percentage?
I took all 10 teams that are either what I considered to be on the bubble at the time, which 2 just got knocked out today, UCLA and Oregon, and 2 that could be on the bubble, meaning the Ohio State Michigan loser. And I matched up those 10 teams. North Carolina's got the worst resume of all of them. right now. And even though they close with a backloaded schedule, just like most of these teams have backloaded schedules, North Carolina's best win before today was Duke.
Mm-hmm.
And their second
And it
best
was
win was
Wake.
Pitt, and the rest of their schedule was nothing. And
What
now
happened with Wake Forest this year?
now they've added Wake Forest today,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got NC State in a couple weeks in an ACC championship game, but it's still the worst resume.
Mm-hmm. But no, do you think what's his name? Drake will be right now. Who do you think the odds-on favorite is to win the Heisman?
Michael, you should have listened to me for long enough to know what my response is going to be to that. Besides, I don't care.
Okay.
No,
I haven't even got a chance to listen.
well, Michael, basically, yeah, I am paid to have an answer. I should have an answer. You are absolutely right, Michael. I should have an answer for you. But understand what you're asking me to do. You're not asking me to predict a football game. You're asking me to tell you what other people are going to vote on. I don't know what other people are going to vote on. I don't know. I haven't really validated their results many times in the past. You know, when they voted for Lamar Jackson over Deshaun Watson, or Derrick Henry over Christian McCaffrey, or voted for Eric Crouch, or on and on and on and on, Paul Horning, and etc. So they've screwed it up enough that I don't know what to tell you.
And there's a bias, Michael. There's a recency bias, and they like the rivalry games. Whoever shows, it's a close race right now. Whoever shows up and just lights it up, I think they're going to separate themselves.
Yep.
So
Here's my three.
The difference.
Drake May from North Carolina, Caleb Williams from USC, and Blake Corum from Michigan. That's my three finalists, in my opinion.
Okay.
Well, there's more than that. There's more than that, right?
No,
there.
that'd be because you get. If I'm not mistaken, don't you get to vote for just three
finalists?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
I'll look it up.
There can be more than four. I know there can be more than four at the athletic club.
But I think you just get the. But I think each valid person that gets voted, you take three. But the thing I'm trying to figure out.
Last year, it was Stroud, Hutchinson, Pickett, and Young, right? There were four.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I do pay some attention to the Heisman. I used to love the Heisman.
Mm-hmm. Just wondering when a non-quarterback is going to win it, or maybe a defensive player ever win it again in our lifetime.
Well, if they watch the LSU Arkansas today, maybe a game today, then maybe Harold Perkins got a couple votes because he was amazing. He played one of the best defensive games I've seen in a long time. And to Tim's point, I don't know what kind of stats he has, but if you watch USC play with and without Eric Gentry, then you have an understanding and appreciation for how good he is and how impactful.
What position does he play anyway, Tim?
It's kind of strange. He plays like Tim's going to be.
He plays the Mike.
But sometimes he looks like he's playing middle linebacker.
That's what he is. He's at middle linebacker. He played rush end at ASU, and they just saw he's just so freakish. He can be so disruptive. They moved him to the middle of the field, and he does a great job there. It's going to be interesting. Yep. I think he's an All-American before it's all said and done. Before he leaves SC, he's a true sophomore right now.
My last thing is to JW. We've all had your disagreements with you, man, but you're going to be missed. And with Christmas just being 6 weeks away, I got to say, hey, it's a perfect time to go to Amazon.com and use Mark's link for it, man.
Boy, I love to hear that. I never argue or disagree with that point.
All right. Oh, hey, Tim, one last thing before you go. Your show tomorrow night is going to be off the chain because I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of fun talking about what happened tonight in the Pac-12.
I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. Yes, I agree.
All right. And I can't wait for your top 25 to come down in about 12 hours, Mark.
Yes, we'll get on that.
All right, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Have a good night.
For Purdue.
Bye, Michael.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Michael. Thanks. All right, Tim. You hanging out for one more?
Yeah, sure.
You don't have to. We've got Christopher on the line.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Chris. What's going on?
How are you? Good. Oh,
we're here with Tim.
I know. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Chris.
How are you? Oh, I was just kind of thinking, you went round and round, and I think, I don't know if you, I mean, just from my perspective, which you have to factor that into it, I guess, a little bit before you come to any conclusion. But, I kind of halfway agree a little bit with both of your points, to be honest with you. I mean, if we're talking about what is it really a tournament though? I don't know what would you call it when it's limited to 4, Mark? Is that a tournament, or is that more of a, what would you say that is when you limit it to as few as 4 teams? Is that a tournament?
Well, it still can be called a tournament. I don't know the exact definition of a tournament, but it's basically, I would think, when you have to play multiple games in some type of bracketed format.
Right.
The reason people call it an invitational instead of a playoff is because, in my eyes, this may not be the dictionary definition, but a playoff is an objective system.
Sure.
And a invitational is obviously an invitation based on people's selections. And that's what we have.
Yeah, and I think I mostly understand that. I know I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, you might know, in fact, you probably do, what they consider, I guess, for each potential invitee. I know, I think we said one year, somebody brought it up that Washington went in 2016, and I don't know if it was based solely on the fact that, I think they were a conference champion, but I think they were also, they'd only lost 1 game, I think, the whole season, right?
Yes.
And so they probably factored both into it, I would think. And then, of course, they had Peterson as the coach, and, they were kind of trending. I think wouldn't you say they were kind of trending up at the time, Mark? They were kind of the Washington, at least during that time that he was there, weren't they kind of moving upward a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Well, Chris Peterson, yes, lifted that program. Certainly they upgraded that. I hope that was not under consideration by the playoff. It was more so that they won a Pac-12 championship. They only lost 1 game, and that was the consideration. Versus the Big Ten champion, for example, had 2 losses. So they were left out. The Big Ten champion, 2 losses, Penn State, and the Big 12 champion, Oklahoma, had 2 losses. So therefore, Washington got the selection.
Oh, the Big 12 champion. Actually, I didn't know that they had 2 losses that season. Was that Oklahoma?
Yeah, Oklahoma. Yep, 11-2. They lost
to Ohio State, didn't they?
And Ohio State. Yep.
I remember they got beat by Ohio State. I think that was one of the games that they got beat by.
Yeah,
but
they lost to Houston.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, and I don't know that I'll probably do it very well, but it's kind of to Tim's point a little bit. Hopefully, I don't know if I'm repeating him, but let's just say, for example, that Oklahoma had advanced. I mean, they'd already gotten beat by Ohio State. And did you say Ohio State was in that tournament? I think they probably were.
2016, yes, as a non-champion.
Oh, as a non-champion.
Yeah.
I guess my question might be simply if we already kind of know, and maybe, I think things change over the course of a season. I understand that. And I mean, we don't know. We can't say we know. I mean, we might know kind of because of the way it was such a lopsided game or whatever. But, and I know Oregon's probably not going to go now. But, I guess I'm a little torn on the idea of seeing any team really have to play the same team twice. That's kind of like you were saying it too. I think that, I don't know how easy that is to do either. I think, I don't know if it gives the advantage to the team that's already gotten beaten. I don't know if it does or not, but if you've already kind of demonstrated you can beat the other team, I don't see a whole lot of advantage to having to beat them twice. I don't know. I mean, maybe just to prove, I guess, that you're the better team. Maybe that's all that really does, but I'm not sure I really like that part about postseason. I'm gonna include the title games in the postseason because I kind of even if they're not formally part of the postseason. So like when TCU, or if it is TCU, if they have to play, like, let's say, I don't know who it would be, maybe Kansas State or somebody, let's just say they have to beat them again. I'm not quite sure that really is an advantage to either team, is it?
That's just the way the Big 12 is set up. So I think you have a very valid point that, for example, in 2011, we had Alabama and LSU play a second time for the BCS championship, the national championship. You had all these other teams, including Oklahoma State, who were not given an opportunity, but the formula, which was human vote plus the computers, said that those were the 2 best teams, so they played again.
Yeah, but I think Alabama won that fairly convincingly, didn't they?
Yes.
I don't know. I guess. Well, I don't know. I mean, sure, we could have long discussions about whether Oklahoma State should have been in there over LSU or whatever, or I guess it would be over Alabama. But I think the proof's in the pudding sort of thing. That's why I'm not really sold on the. I mean, it doesn't really do a whole lot of good, I don't think, to have endless arguments about what we think of the tournament. But I'm not necessarily anti. I think it works, but I don't know. I don't know where you stop though. I don't know if we're gonna say, okay, we'll stop at 12. That makes sense. Well, I mean, it kind of does actually, but let's just say I don't know what the limit would be on who would get to go. But if you have maybe an undefeated, I don't know who it would be. Maybe a Marshall, maybe. Let's just say for case in point. Would they? I mean, maybe they'd even be in there for because they're going to probably put one in there. But let's just say they didn't though. I mean, would that maybe make it to where a 12-team tournament might not be sufficient to include everybody, or was that even going to? Do they have an allowance for that? Do you know?
I'll let you know what I think, and then Tim can offer his thoughts. So the counter argument to an expanded playoff is always, well, if you expand it to 8, then number 9 is going to be mad. And then if you expand to 12, number 13 and 14, they're going to be mad. And I understand that. Yes, you can always have an argument with other teams that have resumes that are similar to the last teams that made it. However, the difference in this expansion going from 4 to whatever it is, it's going to be 12. But even if it made it to 8, is you have inclusion of all the conference champions. So right now, a team can argue, we won our conference and didn't make the playoff, where that excuse is going to be taken away in the future. That even if you thought you were the 12th best team in the country and should have been selected to the playoff, the argument can be made to those teams that have an argument or feel they have an argument, win your conference.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other question I have for you, Mark, and it's just kind of something I've thought about. Why was there such a push to expand? To me, it seems like we're jumping pretty far from 4 to 12. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter at this point. Maybe that was the only one that made sense to. I mean, it kind of makes sense to me too, if you want to know the truth. I don't think 12 is like an odd number to use. But why not maybe go from 4 to 8, like you were saying? Why not try 8, see how 8 tries? And then I don't understand exactly why we had to go straight from 4 to 12. Is there some underlying cause that I'm unaware of that I don't know anything about?
I've got to think then it's money motivated more than anything.
So the contracts, maybe the potential contracts that are available.
You're going to make more money the more games you play.
And if you're going to have a bye, if you want to expand it, why not just go to 5 and have 4 play 5 if you do buys and then go from there?
Well, no,
because it's about money.
Well, I understand that to some extent, but at the same time, I don't know. I think people have already made this point, so it's probably something I'm repeating again. But personally, it's just from my perspective, which might not be the common view or whatever. But I don't necessarily anticipate a playoff being that much bigger of a draw than what we already have. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe I've been wrong before. Well, I just don't see it. I don't. Oh, okay, now everybody's gonna be real. Maybe the first year, kind of like with the first year of CFP, everybody did seem to kind of really get behind it, and then it just kind of seemed to me it just kind of like we talked about last season. Maybe it was partly because of who went, but I don't know that there was a huge amount of enthusiasm for the playoff. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but was there I think both the playoff and the title game weren't necessarily that well received, were they? Am I wrong about that?
What's your thought on that one, Tim? Anything?
I'm not gonna lie, I spaced. I'm not like Chris. I was reading the chat and I spaced out. I'm so sorry.
One more time, Chris.
My point was, we got the same pairing in the championship game that we already saw in the SEC championship
last year.
Was there a big following of the title game, or am I missing something there? I don't.
The rating wasn't great,
but it wasn't bad either. I mean, it was probably relative to who would win. It was pretty good, probably, right?
Not compared to other championship games. No, wasn't a great TV rating.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I guess we're promoting a playoff, and I just kind of want to know if the evidence support that it's going to be, everybody's going to really be excited about it. Everybody's going to like it. Is that something that's kind of been proven over time, or I don't know that to me, it's like just another way to go about it is the way I look at it. But maybe I'm not looking at it the same way other people do.
I guess the thought process is that when you include brands like Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Penn State, whomever those brands are, the majority of them are high draws.
Sure.
And so the
Well-
draws that they usually have for bowl games are going to be much higher in a playoff because there's much more at stake.
That, and to be honest, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm sure the SEC watches a lot, but watching a rematch, watching rematches of teams that have already played sometimes can be a bit boring.
Well, I don't even know that that's how I feel about it, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't really have much objections to what they do, even the Big 12. I mean, they do it pretty much every year, I think. But I just, so one team wins, so one team, I think one year, I don't know if it was that same year you were talking about it. Wasn't there a year where the Oklahoma and Texas split? I thought there was.
Yes.
Maybe there wasn't, but at that point, I guess I think you still have a champion. So I mean, maybe it might not really matter, but maybe people want to see them play twice. I'm not going to say that they necessarily don't, but I don't. I just wonder in terms of actually having to choose a national championship, if that's necessarily the best way to go about it. And I know we talk, conference. I mean, we're going to put like a big, conference championship game. That really, really what it is just another. I mean, I don't want to diminish it, but if you want to get right down to it, though, it's just another game at the end of the season that includes two teams that maybe haven't played each other yet.
Yeah. So to further extend your point, I think this will add to your list, Chris. Think about this. TCU could enter the Big 12 championship game with 0 losses, and they could be playing a team that has 2 losses in the conference, including a loss to them.
Sure.
And that team could defeat TCU, end the season with 2 conference losses and be the conference champion over a TCU team that only lost once.
Sure.
And they could, in fact, actually lose. They could be facing TCU, a team with 3 losses in conference, as a 9-0 team be playing a 6-3 team in the conference championship game that they already defeated, plus has 3 losses, lose that game and not be the conference champion.
Now, in the Big 12, because I'm not completely sure I understand it, is it just the top 2 that finish in the conference? It's kind of like in the, yes. I think they do that for most of the other conferences too now, don't they?
Just the Pac-12 this year.
Really? Because I thought I was under the impression that the Big 10 was moving that way too.
Well, they may in the future, but not this year.
Oh, they still have divisions?
Yes, and the ACC is moving to that next year.
Oh, I see. And the other question I have about that again is, and this is kind of where I was trying to take it, and maybe I'm not doing it the right way, but I know you can't prevent that in the Big 12, but like I would think, kind of like we were talking, I mean, you remember all this, Mark, because I think you follow college football a lot better than I ever will, but I think there was like some time ago, there was like you'll get it right and I'll get it wrong, but had something to do with the Rose Bowl. And I think it was if you'd already been to the Rose Bowl, you couldn't go again or something like that. I mean, is there something like that where maybe if 2 teams have already played each other, is there some kind of, because that's what I would like to see. If it's where they've already played each other and you already have a team that's already won, and I know you can't do that in the Big 12, but like, let's just say like in the Atlantic or somebody like that, is there a way to make sure that you have the 2 teams that haven't played each other yet? Is there a way to go about doing that? Do you know?
There's a way you could do it, but that's not currently in play in these conferences.
Well, I mean, I want it to be fair. Don't get me wrong, but if we know it's going to be Ohio, let's just pretend. I don't know, Ohio State and who would it maybe be? I don't know. Maybe you could tell me, but Ohio State and Michigan State or somebody. Well, I guess it wouldn't be them, but Ohio State and whoever the cross divisional champion is, and if they've already played each other, I guess I just don't see it. Kind of like Tim. I don't know if Tim feels this way or not, but we already kind of know who the better team is. I don't quite understand what the point of having them play again, really, even if there's a difference in the result. I don't.
So you would have the second place team from the division play the other first place team?
No, I just mean like in the event that they've already played each other. No, I just mean in the event they've already played each other, is there maybe another way to kind of like maybe put 2 teams together that maybe haven't already played each other? That's all.
Well, if you can devise a way to do that fairly, then go right ahead. I'm not that smart.
Well, I don't know that I am either. I just kind of was thinking maybe that would be a better way to go about it, though.
So here's my perspective, Chris, is that I understand your point, and Tim's made the same point, and I somewhat agree with it as well. Watching Georgia and Alabama play for a second time in a month was not that appealing to me, even though I thought they were the 2 best teams in the country. So I'm still watching what I believe are the 2 best teams in the country, but I'm thinking much like where I'm envisioning this like Tennessee, Georgia playoff game that could ensue this year, and thinking, Wouldn't I rather see Georgia play USC? Yeah, I would. I saw Georgia play Tennessee.
I wouldn't.
I think I know where you're going with this then, Mark.
Georgia play Michigan. How about that?
Okay.
I think I might know where you're going with this then. You're basically saying maybe we shouldn't have conference championship games and just an expanded playoff then. Is that maybe where you're leaning towards on this? Get rid of the conference championship games and just maybe include a wider swath of teams that maybe wouldn't otherwise be there?
I've always liked the conference championship games, but maybe they've run their course. I get your point, Chris. I definitely do. But I don't know how to get around that if you have two divisions, or even if you just have a conference where you select the two top teams. Let's understand that most of the time it's not a rematch, because it only is common sense that if there are two teams that play during the regular season and one has to win the game and one has to lose the game, that already knocks a loss on the other team's record. So that makes it more difficult for them to reach the championship game and win their division. So we don't usually see rematches because of that factored in, if you follow me.
Right.
But it does happen. But it's uncommon, even in conference championship games. But I don't know how else you would do it. You wouldn't want to take a team and just knock them out of a conference championship just because they already played this other team and deny them a right that they earned by winning that division.
Sure. Well, I guess that's about the other thing. I already talked about it, but it's not that I'm trying to promote anything. It's just that, and Tim doesn't want to talk about it, and I don't halfway blame him. But the one thing I remember about, the season that, I guess you guys think isn't as important as it used to be. But, when Brigham Young, when they beat Michigan, I'm just going to let you know, Mark, I know it's not in terms of maybe the best pairing you could ask for, but I think in terms of putting BYU to the test, I don't know that they could have played a tougher opponent that game. But that's just my opinion. I know you don't necessarily share that opinion, and the other thing was, I'm not going to take anything from anybody. I think Florida deserves a credit for being who they were, and I think Washington deserves credit. But I don't think you can just throw BYU out on the, I think they all deserve credit. That's kind of where I was trying to, that's the only reason I keep bringing it up. I think some people want to throw them to the curb and say, well, nothing they did matters or whatever. And I just don't see it like that at all.
Well, Chris, I will say thanks to you. I don't know that I've had one video that has created more traction of discussion than that one on the 1984 national championship. Whenever I produced that 4 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, I just think that they deserve credit for what they did. That's all I'm trying to do is just give them credit for what they did. I'm not trying to promote them really. I don't know that I can. I don't know that I even can, but I'm not going to take something away from them that I feel like they deserve.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, Tim. What do you
I don't know
think?
how you do it, Mark. Night after night. These shows, talking to people like me. I don't know how you do it. I think you should take Tony up on his idea, Dr. Mark, after dark, dealing with all of your anxiety from your football losses. I think it's a winner.
Okay.
But
well, you guys take the reins tomorrow night, so I never know who quite to promote. I throw on when I tweet that out every Sunday night. I know Exploring with Ben's on there, and you're on there, and Tony's on there. We got Jordan Bowman jumps on there, and Will.
One Scoop John.
One Scoop John. It's a good crew.
I just hang out with them. They let me keep coming back. Yeah, they do a good job.
There it is. All right, good stuff.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks,
God, God bless Jeff Webster. Roll Tide for Jeff.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Tim. All right, folks, that should do it for another Saturday night here at the Voice of College Football. Think about this. We only have two more of these, two more precious college football weekends, college football Saturdays, only two more. Then we've got conference championship weekend, then into bowl season for those of you who care, that still care, like me and others. I enjoy bowl season, and you know that we're going to attack it all as much as we possibly can for the rest of this college football season and beyond. So we appreciate you being here. I will have my top 25 that actually makes sense. I am not going to promise this, but I am going to attempt to get all the power rankings of every conference done. I usually only get to about 2 because understand I got 25 team channels. I really have about 15 or 16 that we really work on. And by the time I get to all those, then sometimes the videos here on the main channel sometimes suffer a bit. But there's tons of stuff that I'd like to get to, and I will do my best to get to these breakdowns. And as soon as the college football playoff rankings come out on Tuesday, there's a number of scenarios I'd like to play out and also, look at what's happened in past history and how that relates to now in terms of expectation of how far a team could possibly rise out of nowhere to make the Final Four and such. We got Jason. Mark, you did not talk about Yale beating undefeated Princeton. We didn't get to it. Once we expand this show to like 4 hours, I guess we'll be able to do that. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you on a Sunday with the top 25 that actually makes sense, power rankings, and more content. Keep it locked in here. And, of course, the College Football After Dark show, of course, on Sunday night, 10:45 Eastern Time.